one side impacts on the other by way of some huge event. For those of us who might have remembered the events of July 27th, 1990, there was a bombing by the army very close to TTT, which was at the time. And as we heard the statements coming from the senior officers of the army subsequently, that was meant to shock those who were inside holding the hostages. And so to create a psychological advantage. And what the government therefore did, and the board, is to run down a set of numbers. $25 billion is needed right away, otherwise the country will be bankrupted. And those statements are still being made. The company is making $2 billion a year in losses and will continue to make $2 billion in losses for the next 4 or 5 years. Then we're being told that, and I heard that by myself, Prime Minister speaking in Point Fortin a couple of nights ago, that the refinery loses up to $5 US barrel on every barrel of oil that is refined, and said refining 100,000 barrels of oil, that's 500,000 US dollars a day, you multiply that. So all of these figures are being put out there, and that of course has created a certain mindset in Trinidad and Tobago, a shock and awe, and therefore demobilizing people, desensitizing people, or put it on the other side, getting people to the point where they believe that this option of closing the refinery and sending everybody home is the only way to go. And then, of course, there's a demonizing of the union and of the workers that, and we heard it just the other day, that if it wasn't for this approach to send home everybody, that had to be done because there was no way the union would have sat down and discussed any kind of restructuring that would have seen job losses or parts of the company being cut off or hived off and so on. And the narrative keeps changing. So the first narrative is that we're simply closing the refinery. Then we're hearing there are opportunities for others to buy. Then we are hearing that the E&P, exploration and production activities, will continue under Petrotrim. Then we hear that there will be joint venture partners coming in. So the narrative keeps changing. And in this context, the MSJ felt that we needed to have this discussion, which discussion in a proper process of transparency. And if we had good governance in this country, which we don't, this discussion would be taking place long before any final decision is taken about what should be done with Petrotrim. So the cart was put before the horse. This is not, of course, the only discussion that has taken place. There have been some organized by others. AmCham had one, University of West Indies had one. On Tuesday of last week, the Congress of the People held one as well in San Fernando. So this is part of a continuing discussion about the state of Petrotrim. But I think in today's breakfast meeting, we have been able to bring together some very key stakeholders. And so I want to thank and congratulate the presidents of the Gasparillo Chamber of Commerce, the Couva Point Lisas Chamber of Commerce, and the Pinal Debe Chamber of Commerce for being here with us this morning. Your presence is very important, and we hope that through you, you can carry the message back to your membership. We also want to thank the president of the Petroleum Dealers Association, who is here with us this morning. I'm not sure if anybody from Unipet is here, but we invited Unipet. We are hoping they would also have been here, because they have, both the PDA and Unipet have been making statements of concern about what is taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have representatives from a number of the credit unions that are going to be very directly affected by this decision about Petrotrim. We have Antilles Credit Union. We have what used to be called the Trinta Penal Credit Union, which is, I suppose, just the Penal Credit Union for the workers down there. I know that we have some board members of TECU. I'm not sure if they're formally representing TECU, but we do have some officials of TECU, and we also have a board member, I think, of the Palo Seco Cooperative Credit Union, and I also want to recognize Mr. Joseph Remy, president of the Trinidad and Tobago Cooperative Credit Union League, who is also here with us this morning. If I missed out any of the credit unions, my apologies. And of course, we have a number of interested individuals, and of course we have several officers and members of the Oilfields Workers Trade Union and other trade unions. I recognize BIGU and the Registered Nurses Association as being present. I'm not sure if I've missed out anybody else, but certainly welcome to everyone who is here this morning. The procedure, and of course, I also have to recognize the fact that we have a live audience because we are streaming live on Facebook. So we do have a live audience, and of course this will then be available for people to view online subsequently. And we have a very good representation of the Trinidad and Tobago traditional media here with us this morning, so members of the media, welcome. Our procedure for today is going to be quite simple. We are going to have 3 panelists, and they're going to speak in the order in which they are seated. Mr. Anthony Paul is a well-known person as an energy consultant. He has worked in both the government, in the Ministry of Energy, in the state oil company, Petrotrim, as well as the private energy sector at BPTT, various periods of his young life, and is now doing consultancy, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but is most times outside of Trinidad and Tobago in places like Ghana and other places of Africa and so on. And so Tony is going to bring his knowledge to bear on the energy industry of Trinidad and Tobago and the pros and cons of us having a refinery operated by Petrotrim. Next to Anthony is Mrs. Carolyn Bechan, who, as we all know, is the political leader of the Congress of the People, but is also known as a former Minister of Energy. She served as well as chairman of a state oil company, National Petroleum, in many years ago, and is knowledgeable about the energy industry. And I know that there's some people who have been putting out all kinds of statements from political platforms, both formal as well as social media platforms, and talking about some kind of political accommodation between the MSJ and the COP. I was very happy to speak at Carolyn's forum on Tuesday last at Naparima College, and we're very glad to have her here because it is important, as Radhika Golban said in her opening comments, it's very important that persons who know about the industry and are committed patriots of this country speak out and take action and so on, because as the saying goes, or put it the other way around, evil flourishes when good men and women do nothing. And so we're very glad to have Carolyn here this morning with us. And the third panelist is Mrs. Denise Deming, who is very well known as a public relations consultant and trainer. She worked at one time, as I'm sure she would mention to you, at Point-A-Pear, I suppose in corporate communications, and also was at Whitco and a number of other companies in Trinidad and Tobago. And Denise is bringing to bear her own knowledge and experience of human interactions about decision-making and process and governance. Following those 3 persons who will speak, we have asked 2 others who will be our first discussants or respondents. They're both retired senior persons who worked at Petrotrim. Mrs. Shariba Ali Rajak was the former Vice President of Finance at Petrotrim, and so she's going to contribute to us this morning, and her knowledge of the finances of Petrotrim and her ability to read financial statements and give us a whole handle of what is the real story there. And we also have with us Mr. Winston Mutu, who was another very senior manager involved, particularly in the refining and marketing area, and is very knowledgeable about the issue of both crude pricing and product pricing and how the refinery operates in the context not just of the Trinidad and Tobago market, but the regional and international market as well. So we're going to have the benefit of their comments. And then we're going to open it up to the floor. And in that regard, after Mr. Mutu and Mrs. Ali Rajak present, I'll ask the first person from the floor to be the president of the Petroleum Dealers Association, because I think they have a major concern about what is taking place in the country. So that's how we're going to proceed. I'm not going to introduce our speakers because I've already done so, and I would simply, therefore, ask us to welcome, with a warm Claxton-based South hospitality welcome, Mr. Tony Paul.
Thank you, David, and good morning to all. It's a real pleasure to be here. I hope you can hear me. Let me see if I can get this up a little bit. Anyway, I'll turn it up this way. Thank you. First of all, let me say that David mentioned that I work in different places, and it's a real privilege and honor to be here. I think this is an important, very important discussion. This Petrotrim situation is one that we've been facing for a long time, and decisions had to be made. How the decisions were made and where they're leading us, I think has people concerned, and rightly so. Now, David mentioned that I work in different places. And before I go further, let me apologize to Carolyn, because she did invite me to a forum that her party held last week. And I was actually working on 2 projects, one in Kenya and one in Tanzania simultaneously. It's a 7-hour time difference. So Carolyn, apologies, I had to pull out of that. So, and Carolyn and David know I am not political. I bash every single party. You know, I'm an equal opportunity basher. Yeah. So the problem with the Petrotrim decision, and the reason it's so emotive, is that it crosses many different issues. Now, clearly, the human issues, the psychological issues that go with that, the community issues, the economic issues at the local level and nationally are critically important. Clearly, the issues of Trinidad's fuel security is important. Not only Trinidad's fuel security, but the CARICOM and Caribbean fuel security. And Trinidad's standing and respect of neighbors in CARICOM, that uncertainty brings, and the potential loss of markets in the future. Those are important. But there are many, many other issues. Harris Khan wrote an excellent article on the impact of Petrotrim on capacity building, on training. And in fact, many of you know that Point Leases was significant in that those plants have been running at world-class levels of efficiency and safety. Those plants, up until the plant at Labrie is being built now, all those gas plants were built within budget and under schedule time because of the skills of Trinidad and Tobago craftsmen, technicians. Trained, a lot of them, in Pointe-à-Pierre, but with a system that was developed in Pointe-à-Pierre and Point Fortin and other parts of the oil industry, and then moved in the 70s to John Donaldson, Sandotech. So the systems of training have a lot to give to Petrotrim. Petrotrim has added value to this country enormously. Yeah? So not only that, that allowed us as a nation to continue several things and to grow in some places. One, we continued industrialization and growing industrialization. We continue to add value to our raw material, to oil. As a nation becoming independent, the decision was taken very strategically that we will not be exporters of raw materials. Our natural gas, if you remember, that signature statement by Eglon in 1976, we will not export raw material or natural gas. Instead, we will go down the hard path of doing ammonia, methanol, and so on. And we took that decision. Why? Because we create more value the more we do in country, and the more we get locals to do. Now, a lot of the work I do is around the world is exactly that, helping countries capture more value out of the resources they have. Now, we all can tell right strategies and plans, but you have to implement it. And Trinidad and Tobago, whether we like it or not, has done some really good things at getting value from these resources. And Petrotrim had a big part to play in that. Let me tell you what I mean. The fact that we could take natural gas that was being flared by the multinationals, convert it to value, power, electricity, methanol, ammonia, and then build an industrial estate around that, and then build skills training around that. And those skills that were built for the oil and gas sector can then be used in food processing, in manufacturing. So it supported other sectors. So we were able to put those things in place. But initially, when this oil industry was built, underpinning it was a very clear governance system. And we tend to forget that because it was in the background. Things were run in an orderly manner. The people who were selected to run it in those days in the ministry were selected because of the skills they brought. And they were given the rewards, the incentives, the tools to do it well. And we ran the industry well. And Petrotrim took oil from oil fields that were too old for the multinationals, who were leaving because it wasn't meeting their rate of return hurdles, and continued for years to produce those oil fields. Similarly with the refinery. Now, we forget that over time, Petrotrim paid taxes, and we don't look at the numbers, because if we look at the numbers in the boom time, 2004, 2014, in that period, there's a blip in 2008, Petrotrim's profitability was interesting. If you look at Petrotrim's tax payments, as an effective tax rate, meaning the amount of tax they paid on their gross revenue, and you compare it to BP and Shell, you notice something very interesting. Petrotrim gave more to the country from what they earned. Why was that? Because one, Petrotrim is an indigenous company, so there's now shell companies offshore to which to pass profits or bring costs in. And two, all their books are kept here. They can be audited easily. Yeah? So there's some things that having a national company does for you. Now, the NGC, if you recall, was formed because Amoco was flaring gas that did not meet their international rate of return. But to us as a country, we couldn't waste natural gas. So we built the NGC to capture that gas for the Teak Salmon and P platforms, built a pipeline, bring it ashore, and then Panellists came from that. NGC became a very profitable company. Why? Because we use local inputs, capital, people, to take assets that were lower value to the multinationals and keep getting value. Now, that doesn't mean we can continue doing that. Everything has a life. Ultimately, Panellists and the plants at Phoenix Park, for instance, will have to shut down. Similarly, at Atlantic, right? What causes that decision? And how is that decision made? And how do you balance or trade off against the financial impact, the profitability, and the social impacts? And I think that's what, listening to David and others early on, that's where the contention comes up. The first point of departure as to why we must shut this down is the financial situation. And if you were to believe the numbers, it is dire. One thing the union and the company agrees on is that Petrotrim's situation was brought about by poor decisions and poor behaviors at management and operations. So there's an issue there around that. But Petrotrim manages, like everybody else, under a regulator. And that regulator has a role. And if you know the industry, anybody operating in the oil and gas industry must have a license. And that license has two conditions regardless of where you operate: exploration and production, refining, pipeline, gas stations. And there's an issue around the licensing regime, but that's a different story. So the Petrotrim refining license says, or it should say according to the law, that any licensee must demonstrate the financial and technical capability to conduct the operations in that business. The ministry is the regulator who is charged to ascertain that, to judge whether the company can do that. Any activity, any plant has to be approved through permits, licenses. We hear, for instance, that a plant was built but not to code, and therefore can't be operated. How did that plant get approved? Does the company self-approve? There's a regulator. The reality of the industry in Trinidad and Tobago is that the regulatory regime has broken down for a variety of reasons, largely because we haven't resourced the regulators, but more importantly because the whole mechanism of accountability, meaning if I have a rule, how does somebody else, meaning the owners of the asset, ensure that that rule is being conducted properly and that we're getting the results that we expect it to get? And the way our governance system was set up, that is quite clearly articulated in laws. Now, all laws are quite old. 1969, 1971 regulations. But they're quite good. The systems are very good. Now, as somebody said earlier, I think we're very good, in fact, I was talking to somebody at breakfast, very good at writing strategies and plans, but we fail at implementing. And the laws and regulations did, in fact, have some implementation mechanisms added on to them in the ministry, but those are not being used. Why? Because success, unfortunately, leads to bad behaviors quite often. And a lot of decision-making came out of the formal governance system and moved into informal decision-making mechanism processes. So the accountability went away. So that licenses, for instance, under the law, must be placed in a petroleum register, which is a public document. That hasn't been happening. So you and I, as citizens who own the oil and gas, who own the refinery, should be able to go and say, what is the license and what are the conditions under which Petrotrim is operating this refinery? And if these conditions are there, surely these things must be being assessed. So where's the report of the regulator on the health of the financial state of Petrotrim from 2013, 14, 15, 16? Where are those reports? Where's the report on the technical capability of Petrotrim going back? So the failure of Petrotrim is an outcome, in my mind, of a breakdown of a governance system. Now, David mentioned that I do a lot of work outside of Trinidad and Tobago. And fundamentally, what that work is largely with countries who are new to oil and gas, like Ghana, Guyana, Kenya, and those places. And it's about how to get more value out of your oil and gas resources, but how to ensure that what you put in place remains relevant by putting in a governance system that holds people accountable and allows for a review to make sure you're getting what you expected to get. And if not, you change that. And if I look at Trinidad and Tobago, I get some very, very good examples of things we've done really, really well. And I get some good examples of things we can do a lot better at. Now, we like to complain as a people. Places I work in, people come to visit. I've been to several countries. I think I work in 13 in Africa, and every single one of them comes to Trinidad with admiration. Now, you say Africa is backward, but I've gone to other places like the Dominican Republic, which is somewhat better than some of the African countries. But we have paved roads throughout the country. We complain about potholes, but we do quite well. We have electricity. So you'll remember that a few Easters ago, power went out for a few days, a day or so. We had a commission of inquiry. I mean, in most parts of the world, people love what we have, but we complain. So we have some good things. Well, what that means is that our expectations have been elevated. We expect more. But we got those good things without playing a role. We got those good things sitting back, having others run the sector, run the economy, and we reap the rewards. Whether we are workers, companies, private companies, university, we all got fat of the land. And we did not intervene. We did not stand up and say, I own this resource. I have selected a manager for it. I've put them in a place called Parliament. And from them, they've selected an executive called the government. And why is my board, my Parliament, holding my executive responsible? And by the way, can they do that? And then you look at the law, and you look at the Constitution. And this is a country that we knew from day one was driven by natural resources, mostly extractive. And our Constitution does not have a word as to how we manage those resources. Nothing. And all he talks about constitutional reform never says that the managers of the resource should report to the Parliament, and that Parliament should have this role, and that the people should hold Parliament to account for managing the resources. Nothing. So what happens is that management of the resource is done as management of a private asset. It's done managed on the people's behalf. So that we are here today is not Petrotrim's fault, not the management's fault, not the ministry's fault, not the government's fault, not Parliament's fault. It's our fault. We own the resource. Why have we not demanded that we manage properly? We own Petrotrim. 20 years ago, we knew Petrotrim was failing. 20 years ago, we knew that. Back then, we were talking about the next Carolyn. Is it surprising now that 20 years on, we're here? It's not. What did we do in those 20 years? But I'll put a pin there, because we're here today with a different landscape, where people are now acutely aware of the impact of Petrotrim on the economy, on their lives, on the nation. Man, sorry. I think I'll have to become right-handed. And in so doing, are demanding clarity. Clarity of decision-making. What are the choices being made? Are demanding accountability. How did you make those decisions? Why? What did you consider? And then, who is making the decisions? But people are also not asking it overtly. Sometimes they are. But the question in people's mind is, where are we going? What's the next step? But we are asking the question of the next step in terms of how is it different from what we have today in its manifestation, in the company structure, the people, the process. But we're not asking the question, how are we going to make sure that what we put in place today doesn't fall into the same situation that we have now? We've done this before. We've restructured BWE, we restructured TTT, yeah? And what happened? We got back to where we were, right? So if you agree with me that Petrotrim is the outcome of some other issues, and I posit it's a governance issue, it's how decisions are made, how people are held accountable, and the situation today is as a result of that. The question I ask is, how do we ensure that whatever we put in place has two things that will prevent that? One, what we put in place is done in a way that includes engagement of you, the people who own the assets, who have a right to contribute to those decisions. Secondly, that when you put that in place, we put in place systems of governance that ensure accountability. Accountability in decision-makings, how decisions are made, what decisions are made, and what the outcomes are, so we can track whether we're getting the right outcomes. But not only that, for us to make sure we're going to get that, we must also ask, at this point, as we're transitioning, how do we make sure we do it in that same way? With transparency, with accountability, with a view of where we want to go next. Because we're talking about restructuring Petrotrim. And we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean? And I would suggest that it must mean that we, as people, have resources. We have skilled people. We have training institutions to get more skilled people. We have resources below the ground. We have assets above the ground. We have medical facilities. We have real estate that this entity owns. How do we make sure that we get the most of that? But that answer has to be found in a question of, where do we as a people in a country want to go? And how do these assets and resources play a role there? Now, if you think of what I've said about Petrotrim and the role it played, Petrotrim was an asset that was taken all out of the ground and converting it into value downstream. Many of you will hear that Petrotrim's land production is largely driven by lease operators and farm outs. But do you know the genesis of that? In the 1980s, when the oil price collapsed, Petrotrim had assets with no money to operate it. Local service companies had assets, equipment, rigs, workover equipment, trucks. They had people, but they had no work to do. So a swap was made. Use your assets, produce oil, get paid out of it. What did Petrotrim do in that situation? They kept an important part of the economy working. So Petrotrim was getting people employed, getting people trained to be employed, getting oil out of the ground and adding value to it. That's the value chain that a country like Trinidad has to tap into, using the oil and gas to bring services on board, produce products. But also, significantly, Petrotrim people in Pointe-a-Pierre were the ones who were hired as operations superintendents in all those plants in Point Lisas. They supported other sectors. So this industry supports the rest of the economy in ways we don't think about often. So the question I want us to think about is, whereas we agree that we're at an inflection point, that something is changing, and we're not certain as to what our future state is. I want us to think about how important is it to think about how we get there, rather than just defining what that is. And I leave that challenge to you, and I thank you for these few minutes. Thank you very much.
Good morning to all of you, and a special thank you. It's a pleasure being here this morning, and a special thank you to the MSJ for having me at this forum. And ready? Yeah, go ahead. So we're going to just get quickly into this presentation, and that is, I'm going to start off by saying, is closure the best option? And to remind you that in 1993, during that time, there was an upgrade taking place funded by the IDB for Petrotrim. And one of the issues that came up under Mr. Manning and then Chairman Trevor Bupsing was whether or not the refinery should be closed. And based on a socio-economic analysis, a countrywide impact, the decision was taken that there should be no closure of the Petrotrim refinery. And instead, they continued with the upgrade of that project. Today, I want to say, I am yet to see, whereas I had sight of that report at one point in time, I have seen no report that says why we are closing this refinery. And not just in terms of the financials, the balance sheet for this company, but with respect to the socio-economic issues and the countrywide impact. The next slide, we just talk a bit about the refinery upgrade. Just reminding us, ourselves, many of you may know this because I see members of management, members of the union. The Petrotrim refinery went through almost 3 upgrades, one in the 1970s, 1990s, the 2010s. And there are state-of-the-art plants. You have a replacement cost of close to $4 to $6 billion. A case in point, when that refinery was upgraded in the 1990s, are we aware that we only started seeing the turnaround, the effects of that turnaround, the benefits of that turnaround in 1998? And in fact, workers would recall that they actually shared they had a profit sharing on it, which was very profitable at the time, and they earned. So, I have a problem when we go now to the next slide, when, we keep hearing about this 100-year-old refinery. On Tuesday night, George DeVatile, at our forum, George was saying, because George was there since he's a past member of management, he was present since the days of Texaco. And yes, we may say the refinery is 100 years old, but let us not give the impression that every plant inside the refinery is 100 years old. I noticed on the papers recently, because I'm here this morning because I want to debunk the misinformation that is outside there and that narrative that is taking place. And I say to members of the media with all due respect, I see a lot of pictures of Petrotrim, and I see all these old plants to give this impression, yes, it's a 100-year-old plant. I also noticed, just before you go to that slide, I also noticed an article in the papers naming a set of obsolete plants, the VDUs, etc., vis breakers. None of those plants exist today in the refinery of Petrotrim. They have all been replaced, modernized, including off-site utilities. And we can go to that relatively modern refinery. And you'll note, you had a turnaround of your cat cracker. You revamped the 2HTU. You have a new C3C4 sulfuric acid alkylation. You also have a new isomerization unit. New platform, it replaces the old CCR. The old CRU, thank you. And yes, the ultra-low sulfur diesel plant, that when it comes on board is expected to give another $5 to $6 on the margin. You have a total upgrade of the bulk power. And this was done in expectation of the future growth of the refinery. We're also talking that Petrotrim is also at the forefront of, technology. In the early 1990s, I had an opportunity to work on that refinery upgrade on the distributed control system. And you would note that there's now a fiber optic network, a centralized control room. You have a distributed control system. So it's not to say that we are dealing with an obsolete plant. We are dealing with state-of-the-art technology. So I want to know, where is this decision coming from that we have to get rid of this old car that we have? What are we going to do with these assets? And I just want to take you through some of the pictures, just so you know, to remind people. And I hope the media will take up some of these pictures. You have the upgraded FCCU. Then you have the acid alky. That's the acid alky there. Again. And then another one of the acid alky. The ultra-low sulfur diesel. Okay? So these are some of the new plants, and there are more. So I wish that sometimes we would take up some of these pictures and stop giving this false narrative that is out there. Let's just take a close look at the refinery economics, the gross margin. Because we hear a lot about the gross margin. And when I listen, I hear we are losing all this money. The refinery is losing money. I remember when we started this debate, I mentioned that 2017 financial accounts, audited fiscal 2017, indicated that Petrotrim had a gross margin, profit margin. And then I was told, no, it was the upstream that was masking all the losses from the refinery, hence the decision to close the refinery. So what is this gross margin? It's when we talk about the sale of all the products sold, refined products, less the cost of sales, which is the cost of your crude oil input. Are you aware that the gross profit margin this year, in accordance with the July accounts, is $8 to $10 per barrel of refined products? That's the gross margin. And yes, there are some factors that impact on that bottom line of the gross margin. How we actually purchase crude oil. In fact, our indigenous crude, and I will leave this for Winston, because Winston did a very good presentation on Tuesday when we talk about our transfer pricing. So it may be the other way around. Because of the way we are setting that transfer price, the cost of sales is coming out very high, which is depressing your gross profit margin. And because of that, and that's because we have a problem in accordance with the law, and Tony will tell you that as well. When I was there in 2010, I established the pricing committee, re-established that pricing committee to ensure that we have a proper system in place for setting the transfer pricing and all pricing for all companies. And again, we need to ensure that this happens, because I think what is going on here is that we are escalating the cost of sales figure, inflating that transfer price, and therefore giving the impression that the E&P is profitable. I am not sure, if we look at that transfer price, that it is arm's length, whether it is realizable internationally, and I hope during the discussion period we pick up that issue, because yes, there may be some issues right now in terms of WTI, Brent, the differentials, but we expect, come 2020, prices of our indigenous crude, they will decline even further. So what are we planning on? What data was used in this analysis? And I call again for the release of this McKinsey report that had this suggestion or recommendation, because I would love to see the data that was used, that came up with this analysis that says that your margins are in the negative. Next slide. Again, too, we'll have a better discussion on the transfer pricing. And I know Winston will talk a little bit about it, because we did note in the Lashley report that you had a situation where our crude was actually higher than WTI. And normally that tends to be lower. It tends to be discounted, our indigenous crude, because of the quality of our crude. So if I just take this refining margin, which is $8 to $10, and in accordance with management accounts of July 2018, and I know Shariba will add a bit to this, that margin, $8, $9, and $10, if you look at what the operating expenses, we take off the operating expenses of $4.50. That includes all your wages and salaries, fuel costs, materials, etc. Then we take off $1 for the overheads, which is all your corporate services, human resource, security, etc. You are coming up with a positive cash flow of $2.50 for every barrel of refined products. Now, that scenario tells you, when we look at the cost of financing both your long-term and short-term, whether we're talking about this $850 million debt, $750 million debt, the financing cost, interest cost, together with the short-term is $2.40. So guess who is carrying the cost of financing this debt right now? Not the upstream, the refining and marketing, the refinery. They are carrying the cost every day by contributing $2.40 out of that $2.50. If we are dealing with $9, we will still have a positive cash flow of 10 cents. If we are dealing, with $9, it's $1.10, the most likely, the average, okay? What causes you to go into negative is the depreciation and amortization cost. If you take a look at it, you will see it's $2.36. That is not a cash outflow. That is a non-cash adjustment. And therefore, if I go to the next slide, and I'm quoting, this is the corporate circular from Petrotrim, dated, I just summarized it there, 5th of March 2018. This was the board of directors and the management explaining what is this $2 billion loss that they're talking about. And this is where I'm projected, because the government and those of the members of the board have not said where they got their $2 billion loss from. Those figures. They're not telling us how they arrive at this $5 million loss per day. Is it, David? $5 US per barrel. They're not saying. So we're just reverse engineering and trying to figure out where they got the figures. There is a $2 billion loss in your 2017 audited fiscal statements. But if we go into that, you will notice this is the board explaining why you had that loss. It's not a negative cash flow. It has to deal, and I quoted specifically from this corporate circular, it has to deal with all the significant non-cash adjustments, dealing with impairments of assets, expensing capital borrowings, non-recognition of deferred income tax, reduction of inventory carrying costs. These are non-cash adjustments. In some cases, they are one-off. When we look at if you look at the cash flows themselves, you have a $1.5 billion for earnings before interest, depreciation, tax, and amortization. You have a cash flow that is $2.5 billion. That's in their accounts. And that is explained here in this circular by Petrotrim on the 5th of March 2018. So therefore, if I go again to the next slide, to see the trend, we now look at year-to-date, fiscal 2018. And as at August of this year, remember the end of the fiscal year is September. So as at August, we're talking about $624 million loss. But let's look at what the individual figures are saying. You have an operating surplus of almost 269, let's say 270 million. Am I correct, Shariba? If I exclude depreciation, meaning if I take out the cost of depreciation because it's a non-cash adjustment again, I'm coming up at 964 million. If I look at the interest costs for 2018 fiscal year, 690 million in long term and 20 million short term. Definitely, your cash flow can carry the cost of the debt, what I'm saying, and the interest cost. You still have some surplus that will allow you to make that capital payment of 31 million for this year. Am I correct, Shariba? Right, barely? Yes, probably breaking even on that. But I wanted to make this point because every time I hear, and tomorrow is budget, I want to know the Minister of Finance, by shutting down this refinery, was it the intention to pass this burden onto the taxpayers? I'm looking carefully for the budget statement tomorrow to determine if they are carrying this total debt by the government, the taxpayers, including the financing costs. And there's another issue. We keep hearing about this 850 million bullet payment. It didn't come out of the sky. We knew about it from ever since. In 2010, members of management will recall we met, we discussed how we were going to deal with that 850 million bullet payment. As far back as putting together a sinking fund where revenues from all the new plants, 50% of it will go towards that sinking fund to cover this 850 million bullet payment next year. The 750 million which comes due in 2023, let us remember that's not 750 outstanding. That's an amortizing loan. And therefore, you have been making contributions to the capital. And if I'm not mistaken, it's about what, 250 million is what is outstanding on that loan. So I just thought that, I could make, clear this air about where this loss is coming from. All right? And, but you know what? We are presented with a golden opportunity. In this debate, in this national discourse, why can't we look for opportunities to improve the way forward? If you are saying, Tony just spoke about the talented people we have in this sector, I hate to think that we went down this road because we could not talk to the union, because we couldn't get a meeting of minds, that we did all this damage because we could not get a meeting of minds, and we as a people could not come together and be innovative and understand the improvements required and how to make it better? Do you agree with me that we couldn't do that? I ask this rhetorical question because I find our people go all over the world. Take Tony. Tony is all over the world, giving inputs to other governments, making recommendations. How many more Tonys we have out there as well? It says a lot for the talent in our sector. So forgive me if I'm passionate, because I'm always very passionate about these issues. Some of the improvements that we can look at, we can have a chat about it. These are all the improvements that were identified by Shell. Then there were improvements identified by Solomon. Next slide, right? And just this one slide I wanted to say, in terms of the crude oil, the next slide, those other improvements. If we compare quality, making the point again, but I want to make this point that the best market for your crude oil is this refinery in Trinidad and Tobago. Right? Given the pricing issues, the availability of naphthenic type refineries to process this crude, the possibility that that crude price will come down in years to come. And I'm going to quote this issue because one must remember that when Petrotrim was formed, it was because they moved to an integrated model. And I'm reporting here from US News, April 27, 2018, where both Exxon and Chevron, and this is a quote from them, have consistently, US News was saying that, they have consistently touted the benefits of owning businesses that produce and refine oil, saying they better balance earnings as commodity prices rise and fall. Meaning because of that uncertainty and unpredictability of your crude oil pricing, when it falls, your refining margins are able to pick up that value. So just again, to improve, next slide, improvements on the refining margins, okay? We are saying that with all those other improvements, if you are able to shave off $1.50, $1 off of your operating expenses, 50 cents off of your overheads, you can even cover your costs, not only of your financing costs, but of your depreciation costs, meaning, therefore, you're generating enough money to put back into a reserve for reinvestment into assets of the refinery. And therefore, I'm also saying there is need to look at how we look at our crude oil pricing, the purchasing methodology. And with that purchasing methodology, we might be able to even improve further on the margin itself. Next slide, the future of refining. And then this is a quote, again, thanks to stronger, and this is according to Moody's Investor Service Oil and Gas Journal, thanks to stronger distillate margins and favorable crude differentials, refining and marketing companies' earnings will increase by 13 to 50% through the end of 2019, and growth will likely persist beyond 2020. So tell me, why are we shutting down the refinery now? Why are we shutting down the refinery now? Right? Comparative advantages. Next slide. We have a competitive advantage. We have you have right now the Venezuelan refining capacity, which is on decline. Trinidad is, strategically located to pick up some of that refining. That's some of those refining opportunities. We did not even talk, and I wanted to mention this, it's not there. There's also the benefit that Petrotrim serves in this country of almost $200 million towards LPG subsidy. The government will now have to go out on the international market and pay Mount Belvieu Plus for LPG. So if they decide, government, here what, you provide going forward those prices to Petrotrim, then they will even get more cash for reinvestment purposes. Next slide is the way forward. Again, debt servicing. What I wanted to say here, I think, I am amazed with this closure of the refinery. There are some bankers who I spoke to. The day before the refinery, the announcement, there was a lot of interest in refinancing that $850 million bullet payment next year. But with the narrative that has gone on over this past couple weeks, the negatives about Petrotrim, the statements being made by the Prime Minister and the members of the government and the board is hurting the image of Petrotrim. Immediately that announcement was made, investors were spooked. And I cannot understand. And today I was just saying to Denise, another BWICL issue? Is this what we want to do? Pass the debt over to the people of Trinidad and Tobago? When you could have been using the cash flows? What's this issue about shutting down and reopening when we don't fix the fixable problems? So, and I want you to know, they're touting now, the Petrotrim bonds is down for downgrade. And it's instructive to listen to Moody's. Moody's actually did a review on the papers. I saw it on The Guardian this week for the Petrotrim downgrade. And you know what they were saying? What caused that for them to look at this Petrotrim downgrade? Possible review. Because of the lack of clarity of the business profile and strategy being articulated by the government and the board right now. That is what is causing the problem, not Petrotrim. Because you know what they said? We don't have a focus. They have no understanding of what is this new E&P business. What strategy are you putting in place to carry your debts and your financing? And they listed a number of issues, and I know David tell me, my time is up. The rating agency will focus on the company's business profile. They want to hear more. Okay? So just finishing on that, we are saying, next slide, the debt financing, that $850 million bullet payment, we are saying when that comes due next year, you have a $97.5 million US dollars per year. 96 is an error there that can be used towards financing the $850, defer out the principal payments until 2023 when US $750 million are fully amortized. Something people don't know in this country, Petrotrim pays withholding taxes. Okay, withholding tax, all right, and yeah, okay. All right, I will come back to that. just the next slide, just 2 slides down. The ULSD, I think they have compromised the whole process of the ULSD. And I think the sums of money were recoverable to make sure that we could move forward with the ULSD is recoverable from the contractor Samsung. Of course, you've heard a lot of the benefits in terms of the support services, the spin-off industries, the value added. This is why we set up a Point Lisas industrial estate. Fuel security is another benefit as well. You can move on. Another benefit, those are just the benefits there, the fuel security. The other issue there is the alternative. Last slide. The alternative here is, do we abandon and retire the assets? Do we talk about a replacement cost? The replacement cost is 4 to 5 billion. When we talk about preservation of these assets and the cost of assets remaining idle, do we understand all those cost factors? So apart from the $2 billion that they're talking about they may have to borrow to exit out of this business, do you understand the cost of all these other operations that have to go into effect? Patrolling operators, safety engineers, fire department, emergency plan for defense line, communities. And David, my question to the union is, where was this RFP process, next slide, for a secured data room? If you are interested in bringing in others and you have rejected this proposal from the union, where were the financials? When you go out to do a proposal like this, you have a data room, you have financials, commercials provided, operating and engineering manuals, regulatory approvals, you have to do a due diligence, etc. And that process takes 6 months. What is this thing that I just put out on the platform? Hey, anybody want this thing? Come. That's not the way we do business. That's not the way we do. You talk about governance, Tony. That's not the way we do business. So just on the last slide, let me just say, the impact on the CARICOM markets, they're not going to stick around. And when we start this, we don't understand the markup for the trader, for the operation itself of the terminaling. When we lose CARICOM markets, they're not coming back. And that is my problem with this whole issue. We have a fixable and doable situation. We have a golden opportunity. We need to be transparent and accountable after we've done all the EIT and open government. I see my problem here is I am not about personality attacks. Okay? We are not about personality attacks. And all I'm saying is we don't want to take decisions that could put us in a tomb. And let me tell you, when we lose our markets, there's no resurrection from that. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. I was trying to get Carolyn to end because, not because what she was saying is not important, but the media wanted to leave. And I really wanted the media to hear our last speaker, Mrs. Deming, and to hear the others. The reason why they want to leave is sadly Ken Fillmore passed away this morning. And so the media wants to catch that story. I was saying to the media quite honestly that while that is an important story, and Ken was somebody I knew personally as well, last time I heard him perform was down in Labre, is that really this Petrotrim issue is going to cause a lot more people, sadly, to pass away. And it's a story that information needs to be made to the public, provided to the public. And so I was asking the media to say, listen, you can catch the Ken Fillmore story the next half hour, but really you can't catch what we're going to hear again. And I'm really sorry the media has decided to go with that and not stay with us for just another half an hour to be able to inform the people of Trinidad and Tobago about the the huge con job that is being put down on this country with Petrotrim. But we will carry the program on radio tomorrow morning, and we're going to have to buy another hour's time on Tuesday so that the whole story could come out on radio. And of course, it's streamed live on Facebook. So Denise, I'm very sorry about this, and to Shariba and Winston and to Mr. Narayan Singh, I'm very sorry that the media is not here to hear you. That's one of the things that unfortunately we have to deal with in Trinidad and Tobago, what is deemed to be priority and what catches headlines. And it comes back to what Tony Paul was saying about how we act as citizens. But often how we act as citizens is because of how we learn about issues. And therefore, if we don't get the counter-narrative, which is what we're presenting today, and the only narrative that is being run down is the losses, 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 union bad, workers bad, 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 then, and all must go home and so on. If that's the only narrative, then unfortunately citizens can't act any differently to how they're informed, because of course knowledge is power. But I have no control over that. What we do have control over is what we will have to pay for to try to get the word out. So with that, Denise, and you no longer have to worry about where you stand behind the podium. Let's welcome Denise Deming.
Thank you very much, and the media knows that I will not stand behind a podium because you won't see me. And I think the whole idea behind this is that we should have some kind of conversation. I am really, really happy to have been invited because as an adolescent, I grew up in a period of inspiration, in a period of hope, in a period of belief. We were looking forward to becoming independent. And that's a message I lived with. I looked forward to hearing what Dr. Eric Williams would say to us. And I think of today's adolescents, and I ask myself, what are the messages that they are being exposed to? And there are two big streams of messages that they are being exposed to. The first big stream is we cannot. So we cannot do cocoa, coffee, sugar, oil, coconut water. We just can't do all of those things. The next big stream that they're being exposed to is a stream of cultural messages that suggest to them aggression and power. Now, if those are the two streams, and we say to ourselves, what will happen 50 years out? Then we are in trouble. Because those messages will linger. Just as the messages of independence remained with me, those messages will linger with our current adolescents, who are the future. But they'll have it even worse, because they will have to find the money to pay for the mistakes of our current reality. And I sincerely hope that the forces of the universe will conspire to change the trajectory. Because if we continue on this trajectory, God help us, we will be in real, real trouble. Previous speakers talked about governance. And one of the issues that I have always been concerned with is the in and out strategy that we have, where one party comes in and destroys whatever was done by the previous party. No business can function, can survive on that as an approach. And it was Peter Drucker who said that culture will eat strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What that means is that the culture that we operate in will always trump whatever your strategy is. So even if you have an excellent strategy, and even if we credit the current situation with an excellent strategy, the culture will kill it. So we have an opportunity in this Petrotrin issue to send messages to our people that we can do things. But in order for us to do that, we have to reflect on our past. I have asked myself, where's the data that tells me about the lessons that came out of Caroni's closure? I don't know that it's available. I have looked in various places. I'm not even sure people at the university have looked at it as an area of inquiry. Because those lessons would have informed what we're doing now. In my own career, I've been involved in several closures, several VSEPs. And there's an approach to it. The first approach is an approach of collaboration. If you do not collaborate with the union, you are going to have chaos. That is a fact. Those that I have been involved in have not hit the newspapers, maybe because they were small, but I think it is because there was an approach that said, we are seeking your interest. So that if the decision to close Petrotrin had been thought through properly, one of the first things that would have happened would have been a joint statement by Labour, government, and management. The fact that that did not happen tells us that the strategy has not, that there's been no consideration of how else can we do this. If you had done something like that, a combination of labor, government, and management, think of the impact of that on the country. Think of people saying, but wait, it's no longer an adversarial relationship, but there's a collaborative relationship here. And if you have that level of collaboration, then individuals may then say to themselves, but wait, maybe I need to change my approach. And if the union, the government, and the management are saying to you, productivity is an issue, we have to increase our productivity, you would be inspired to change the way you do things. When I joined Texaco in 1979, I think it was, I lived in Port of Spain, and despite living in Port of Spain, I had to get to work for 7:15 a.m. And I got there. You know why? The culture said that's what you do. When you came late, you felt ashamed. In today's world, I don't know where that kind of value exists. But I remember when I left the oil industry, and I left, at that time it was Trintok, people were having fun with having a 3-hour lunch. And the reason they were able to have a 3-hour lunch is that Tesoro, Trintok, and Texaco came together. And I blame the union, had not said, we need to rationalize the lunch hours. I'm giving you my experience. Now, maybe that was changed subsequently, but a lot of people took advantage of that. And as a result, productivity was not existing. So the first thing that I've talked about is, had we made a proper decision, we would have impacted productivity. Had we made a proper decision, we would have provided somewhere online or even a piece of paper that said to employees, this is a worked example of if you've been here 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, this is what is likely to happen, because there's a worked example. At the moment, at least 3,500 people go to bed every night, and they ask themselves, how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to send my child to school? Can I afford the car that I just borrowed money to buy? If you had a worked example, then I would be able to say, well, okay, I'm going to get X. I'm likely to get X. Therefore, this is what I can do. Had this thing been considered in a different way, you would have had, by now, a small business development company established somewhere in the region of the refinery, where people could go and get advice in terms of, how do I operate a business? What kind of business should I be involved in? And if that was thought through properly, you would have had a different approach to the ease of doing business. Anybody in this room who has attempted to open or close a business understand that ease of doing business in this country is non-existent. You go to any of those places, the ministry where you have to get a form filled out, it is, as the young people say, it is tears. So had the thing been thought out, you would have had some kind of business bureau support. Had it been thought out, you would have some kind of retraining facility, because that's what you do. If you're going to send home people, there are people who are going to grieve. It is a psychological issue. It is a cultural issue. What is a retraining opportunity? I don't know. I have not heard anything about how are we going to retrain those people, because they're not going to disappear. Had this thing been thought out, you would have had the psychological training, the psychological services. You see, because 3,500 people going home without contemplating their future in a long-term manner has implications for the society. It has implications, there are health effects, there are effects of those diseases of lifestyle. And what are we going to do when those lifestyle diseases, when there's a spike in them? Have we analyzed if there's a spike in lifestyle diseases as a result of CARICOM? I'm not sure. So I can go on and on and on telling you about all the things that should have been done and all the things that will impact us negatively. But I see this as an opportunity. I see it as an opportunity for collaboration between the union, the government, and the company. If that collaboration works, then the message we will be sending to the rest of our society is that we hold the key to our future. We can act, we can do things to make a difference. Without that collaboration, then the message will be the message that our adolescents are getting now, that there is nothing any of us can do. When I think of all the fence line communities, all the small communities that exist and depend on what is happening, anything that happens at Petrotrim, what I see is a ripple effect that will impact the entire society. Can you think of what will happen when 20,000 people, and that's the data that I saw, are treated by the Augustus Long Hospital? What will be their option? How are they going to survive? Is it that the government is taking Augustus Long into its network of hospitals? People need to know things like that. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for this opportunity, and if I had to give a message out of this opportunity, it is a message that Dr. Eric Williams sold us on a dream. Current administrations are destroying that dream. We, the people, have a responsibility to ensure that we do not pay an unnecessary price for bad decision-making. Our society requires accountability, collaboration, and transparency. If you have those three elements in place, then the governance structure will work and work in the interest of our society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Denise, for that. And I just remembered, I suppose because I've been around for a long time, that when there was the first, well, not the first, but in the early 80s, there was a major shakeout in the oil industry when Texaco was still here, when Texaco in 1982 decided they wanted to reduce the manpower, the workforce, and decided that they were going to retrench, to sever all the workers in the company who had less than 10 years service, all the ones with 1 to 10. I remember Common Calendar Tang would remember that they were appointed here at that time as young branch officers. And the workers themselves, because the retirement age was 65 at the time, and the workers themselves came to the union and said, it's better that we, the older ones, go to give the younger ones the opportunity of a longer working life. And so there was an agreement to reduce the retirement age from 65 to 60. And the union and the government, it was tripartite. Aaron Mahabir was Minister of Labor. And Aaron Mahabir as Minister of Labor, George Weeks was President General of the union. I was a young executive officer at the time. And Texaco, led by Mr. Lloyd Austin, Lloyd Austin was the CEO, was the general manager. And we sat down and worked out that process of reducing the retirement age from 65 to 60. And it then required the government to pilot legislation to provide for tax-free severance pay up to, I think it was $80,000 and so on, because at that time, severance pay would have been taxed above maybe $20,000 or $25,000. So the government had something to do. The union and the company agreed on what the packages were for those persons who were aged between 57 and 64 in terms of their loss of earnings to 65, because they would have anticipated their earnings going to 65, and what would have happened to their pension and their loss of earnings. The union, George Weeks had to come to the General Council of the union and have the General Council approve the package before it was signed off on. And it was a very heated General Council because a number of us did not like the agreement. And so, but the General Council, although I was the executive member, I voted for it because the executive, we debated it in the executive, we disagreed, and then we went with Weeks's position. And the General Council was deeply divided on that question, but by a slim majority, Weeks was able to carry the vote to support the early retirement package. I'm sharing this experience in light of what Denise is saying about collaboration. It wasn't easy, and Weeks had to use all of his moral authority as leader of the union to have that vote carried. When we went down to sign the agreement in Ministry of Labor, which was then on Cipero Street, upstairs, building somewhere near where Maritime is now. There was a two-story building there. There was then one television station, TTT, and TTT was very present because Aaron Marbier understood the dynamics of the media and so on. And he started off by thanking everybody, Mr. Austin, General Manager of Texaco, Mr. Weeks, and so on, President General. He started coming down the line of union officers. And I said to Dunat Maraj, who was General Secretary at the time, Dunat is still alive, he's sitting down next to me. I said, Marbier better not call my name here today, because I will get on real bad. And so said, so done. He congratulated Weeks, and Aaron MacLeod was out of the country because George Weeks sent him out of the country because MacLeod was also very unhappy about the particular arrangement. And so Horace Scott, who passed away, congratulated Horace Scott, Assistant General Secretary, and Dunat Maraj, as he called my name. I can't repeat the language that I used. It was industrial language in the finest tradition of oil workers. And the press conference broke up right away, and so on. Because we knew that there were secret discussions between the government and Texaco. We had the cabinet note, you see, with a secret discussion between Texaco and the government with respect to the arrangements that Texaco wanted at that time to continue to remain in Trinidad and Tobago. Because Tony is right, Texaco had planned to leave from the late 70s. But there was collaboration, as tense as it was. And so after that, Trinidad Tesoro then followed suit, and Trinta with reduction in retirement age. And of course, there was a very significant reduction in numbers of oil workers in the country. And therefore, it impacted on the union membership as well. But the union wasn't about simply protecting absolute numbers, as some people want to suggest. But the union really was trying to work out what was the best arrangement for workers and for the industry and so on. So I just thought I would share that experience because there are many others, but that's just one I would share in relation to how a process can work if there's understanding by leaders that you need to engage. So having said that, I now want to ask Mr. Winston Mutu, who has tremendous knowledge about transfer pricing and so on, having worked as a senior manager in, I suppose, from Texaco Trintoc into Petrotrim days, to share with us some of his knowledge and understanding of this issue. Let's welcome Mr. Mutu.
Good morning, all. Thanks, David, for the opportunity to share some of my knowledge with you. I want to just spend a little bit talking about on both sides of the calculations for the gross margin, the cost of the crude, and the revenue side. The first thing is that we have to look at how you arrive at the transfer crude prices. Now, up to 1989, the value of the crude was determined by RLE analysis in the lab, where the basic fractions, the crude fractions, were determined and then valued at market prices. After 1989, they moved to a system where they use a reference crude as a marker, WTI, with an appropriate adjustment for differential, etc. Speaking with the personnel at Petrotrim recently, what they have indicated is that the transfer prices are determined by a volume yield, a deemed volume yield from the refinery, using Gulf Coast prices, whether it is netback or it is FOB prices, we're not sure. What is clear, however, is that the regulations are not being followed clearly, there seems to be some communication between the ministry and Petrotrim as to how the transfer prices are being determined. But particularly if you use this latest indication from Petrotrim, it is grossly inappropriate. Because what you're doing is that you are inflating the value, the intrinsic value of the crude, which is what you should be buying it at, right? By improving the value by running it through the refinery process, right? And that impacts on your gross margins. The higher the value of that crude transfer price, the lower your gross margins. In a sense, the gross margins, when inflated like that, tends to subsidize the refinery. Right? On the other hand, if you look at the ex-refinery pricing system, which came into existence since 1987, where it is provided for recovery of your crude costs and a deemed processing and refinery margin, that too has been abandoned, and we are not sure exactly how the refinery prices, the ex-refinery prices are determined. It would seem that there is no balance in what is happening, and the prices seem to be significantly higher than Gulf Coast prices, and it impacts the subsidy tremendously. Carolyn has covered a lot of what I want to say about the gross refinery margin, but as you have seen that she said, the refinery margins for July to August are very, very healthy, between US $8 to $10 per barrel, compared to more complex refineries in the US Gulf Coast with a 3-to-1 crack spread, which is about 9 to 10. It is extremely healthy. So the problem is that you have to look at your expenses, your operating expenses, your overheads, and there's no doubt that there have to be some adjustments with respect to those elements. I think Shariba will probably talk a little bit more of that. If you look at the work that was done by Solomon Associates and the Shell Global, they have made suggestions of improvements, two of which are very significant. One is the improvement in the reliability of the refinery processes, and two, increased utilization, especially of the conversion units, like your cracking unit, your isomerization, etc. What this would lead to, it would lead to increased throughput levels. It would lead to optimization of your gasoline yields. It would mean to minimization of your fuel oil yields. Fuel oil is the least priced product. It would lead to improved energy and loss performance. If you look at the rated capacity for the refinery of 168,000 barrels a day, and you allow for 10% downtime, then the throughput you come to is about 150,000 barrels a day. Currently, from 2003 to 2010 to 2017, the refinery has been running at a throughput of 127,000 barrels a day. Because to a large extent, the operating expenses, etc., to operate the refinery is purely fixed. If you increase the throughput levels to that, you reduces your operating costs by about 120 US per barrel. It leads to about TT 400 million in profit before tax. Right? So these are the improvements that you can do and you can make, and not difficult decisions to make. It needs proper collaboration between your workers and your management. I think she will show you what the improvements in reliability and utilization of your conversion units, what the increased net margins will be, probably ranging somewhere between 160 to 360 per barrel. All right. As I indicated before, the value, and as Tony has been indicating, the value added by refining your local crude at the refinery is extremely significant. You look at the June, July P&L statements, you will see that the differential between the average crude costs and the product prices in the local and CARICOM market is somewhere in the order of US $17 per barrel, $10 to $17 a barrel, right? Your gross margins are US $10 a barrel. If you go to sell that crude in the international market, you will not get the transfer price that you're getting at the moment. You move from a position of positive to a negative, probably 9 to 11 US dollars per barrel. You get a double whammy, right? And that's a very, very significant thing that they seem to ignore. In addition, as Carolyn has indicated, if you go to close down the refinery, you're importing products, quite apart from the landed cost of those products, from the US Gulf, you have to put a margin for the trader and cover all his expenses, financing expenses. You have to take the freight and handling charges. And then you have to put, for the terminal, they have to cover all their operating expenses, their finance costs, plus their margin. What is that price likely to be? Significantly higher than what you get. Right? So, you know, it is very clear that they have not looked in a mature and dispassionate way at the economics of what they're doing. And basically, that's what my message is.
Thank you very much indeed. And for those who are not as familiar with the oil industry, and for those who are viewing us live on Facebook and who will listen to the radio program subsequently, we will try to break down some of that very technical information so that everyone could understand what transfer prices are, what gross margins are, net margins are, and so on and so on. So we'll break it down so that everybody could understand exactly what is happening. I want to invite now Mrs. Shriba Ali Rajak to the microphone.
Hi, good morning all. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for inviting me to share some of my concerns. All protocols observed. I may repeat some of the things the previous speakers said, but I'll do it very briefly because I covered a range of both upstream and downstream business. As a concerned citizen, and a Petrotrim retiree who has worked in this industry for over 38 years, and both upstream and downstream, I have gained considerable experience in this integrated business, and I stress integrated because it is a natural hedge with the upstream and downstream, and would like to share some of my thoughts with you today. I know this must have been a very difficult decision by the board and approved by the government, bearing in mind the socio-economic impact it would have on thousands of its citizens. However, since I am not privy to the assumptions made to arrive at this decision, and some information may not have been reported in the media, I wish to share my concerns with you today. All studies done on our refinery, and there were several, but I would like to refer to two of the most recent ones, which Carolyn mentioned, that is the Solomon Associates Inc. and the Shell Global Solutions. Not only their study, they held our hands and walked us through the refinery for a while. Have indicated that manpower numbers and costs are very out of line with industry standards. This will have to be addressed with urgency. The throughput to date in the refinery is 131,000 barrels a day. We said the refinery's capacity is 168,000. Bearing in mind T&I and some downtime, we feel we could efficiently operate at 150,000 barrels a day. And we have an operating cost as at year-to-date August. Operating costs meaning the refinery expenses and the service divisions that support refinery in the vicinity of $5.80. As I said, by industry standards, that is a little bit high. So I wouldn't go into all the recommendations the studies made because they have addressed it for improving our throughput to 150,000 barrels a day, increasing refinery utilization and reliability, and they identified areas for cost reduction. So we had the studies identify how we could improve the gross margin, and as you say, the gross margin is just taking your sales less your cost, less your crude purchases, and that is your gross margin. And then below the line, you take out your operating expenses. So if we get a margin uplift and a reduction in expenses, we're looking at anything $2 US per barrel or more. If these recommendations are implemented, we can realize an uplift of roughly 50 cents in the margin uplift and $1.50 in the expenses, which will work out to roughly $800 million a year. Further, the outlook on refinery margins over the next 5 years, and this is based on PIRA, SERA, Moody's, etc., all the pundits in the industry, are predicted to be well over $10 per barrel. And as such, it is not the best time to shut down any refinery, especially one that is modern with a distributed control system like ours that allows for better coordination of operations. The upstream operations are marginal at best. And I know that I've been dealing with the E&P operating statements, and their lifting cost is very, very high. It's only because crude prices are high now, and I mean, we talk about the transfer price if it is realistic. They are making a profit. But any fall in oil prices will adversely affect its operations. As an integrated business, it is a natural hedge. When oil prices fall, margins rise, and vice versa. So for us to get out of the refinery business will be exposing us wholly to the market fluctuation in prices. And nobody really wants to sell a product that you could make and add value to it. For years, certainly from records going back to 1993, we have been trying to increase production with little or no success. I do not believe that the upstream operations will be able to service the refinery debt if the refinery is shut down. Further, this will mean increased capital injection to go after new oil. And here we hear the government talking about increasing production, increasing production. We don't even have a drilling well working right now. In addition to that, I heard Krishna Prasad talk about CO2 recovery, especially in the marine field. But we have all those things available to us, the CO2, water flood, steam flood, etc. And our production is still very low. It's about 30,000 barrels a day in land and Trinma, and 10,000 from lease operatorships. So it's about 40,000, and the decline rate on that 40,000 is about 8%. So it means we have to be getting oil to keep that going. Where that will come from, it will have to be capital expenditure, probably a joint venture, I don't know. And then we're talking about what price that oil will get on the international market. We are not a trader of oil. We will have to build a reputation as a reliable trader. And then we'll have to store that crude for over 2 to 3 weeks to get a cargo. A cargo of crude is about 800,000 barrels. So you're talking about storage for that crude. And then we have to store refined products. We're talking about capacity for storage, which will be an issue. There is a statement circulating that the E&P operations has been bailing out R&M with respect to debt payment. This is not so, and Carolyn addressed that. the free operating cash flows from R&M. And for the non-finance people, when we say the free operating cash flows, we take out the non-cash items, which are in the income statement. And these are things like depreciation, abandonment costs, because we have to abandon the assets according to the accounting standards, provisions from medical and pension benefits. So all these are provisions that you provide. You increase your liability on your balance sheet, but you don't really put out cash. So at a time like this, when we have to make serious decisions, we really look at the ability of the business to generate cash and pay its obligations. A little bit on pension plans and medical plans. The Prime Minister has indicated that pensioners need not worry about getting their monthly pensions. I have some concern about that statement. As a pensioner, I would like to see the report from the actuary to confirm this statement. And further, should the central bank ask for an independent actuarial review? I think so. And medical plans, we service not only Petrotrim employees and their dependents, but also outside in the community we service at a fee. So we service well over 20,000 people. What the employees contribute is just a minimal $40 a month, family membership and a single membership of $20. What will happen to the health service if we have to go to the public institutions or the health center, etc.? Knowing that we have an aging workforce, we have a lot of retirees that use these benefits. You know, all these things have not been addressed in their plans. In terms of debt, the $750 million loan, we pay $62.5 million US a year on that loan, and 18.7 interest on interest and withholding taxes. And this is something that wasn't shared with the public. We say the loan is at 6%, but it's really 6% plus withholding tax, because the bondholders ask for their money net of all taxes. So it's really over 7%. And on the $850 is a loan at 9.75 plus withholding tax of 15%, which works out to be about 11.47%. So the loans are really, really burdensome. So on the $750, as Carolyn said, the balance is $250 million on the principal, and that will finish in May 2022. On the $850, we have been paying $48.5 million twice a year, which is $97.5 million for the entire year, just to service that debt. So the total loan payments for this period, 2018, works out to 1.2 billion TT. If I bring the US, 179 million US to TT dollars. And I'd like to add, at this point in time, Petrotrim has never defaulted on its debt payment. What are the issues? Refinancing the $850 million bond will be difficult, since the government has indicated closure of the refinery. Our next issue is that we have the USLD in the hands of an arbitrator, where we thought we had a good case to recover some money to finish the USLD. We may not be in that good position, having said the refinery will close down. No arbitrator will take you seriously. Loss of key CARICOM markets, and this is why I say I may repeat some of the things because they are important. When you lose markets and people find alternative suppliers, it is very difficult to get back those markets, because your name out there now is non-reliable, right? And these are our high price margins in the CARICOM and the extra-regional market, because in the US it's mainly fuel oil. From my analysis, there will be an outflow of foreign exchange. If we export our crude and import our products, bearing in mind insurance costs, etc., and terminaling fees, I see a net outflow of forex. So where the government is thinking it will be an improvement in foreign exchange, from my analysis, it will be a decrease. Migration of key skills. And Harris dealt really well with this in the papers, so I wouldn't really go into detail. But what I want to say here, key skills are not easy to get. We take years to build these skills. And what will be happening, I'm sure, we'll have a lot of migration of this talent, because there are refineries all over the world that I am sure a lot of the operators and key refinery people will be going after right now. And even if they stay here, we talk about the dry docking facilities and certain plants, these skills don't match that kind of operation. So we will have to retrain. And we have spent billions of dollars in training, and we're not getting value for that money. The social and mental health issues, especially in the short run. I sure the Ward 1 and the St. Anne's may not be able to accommodate the people. I mean, I am a retiree with a pension, hopefully guaranteed for a few years, and yet I am so concerned with the mental and health issues and the social issues arising from this, because it's not the 5,000 employees. When you look at the suppliers, the contractors, the restaurants, the insurance companies, the rippling effect is hundreds of thousands of people will be affected by this decision. Can E&P invent itself or reinvent itself? And if a third party is required, what will be the cost to the country? Because anytime we bring in a foreigner, the foreign exchange goes out. During the period 2011 to 2016, there was an aberration for crude prices in the market. And this is what some of the speakers spoke to. WTI is a 36, 38 API. Our crude is just 22 API, high sulfur, 1.5% sulfur, and high TAN, total acid number. It is more in line with the Oriente crude. And from where I sit, it used to be about 20 to 25% below WTI. This aberration in the market shows a slim margin between WTI and our crude in the last few years, but this aberration would not last. Part of the reason for that, there was excess coker capacity in the States, that they were using fuel oil to produce diesel. There was a high demand for fuel. But the prediction going forward showing that this wouldn't happen. So if we're using that high transfer price as an indicator for what we're going to get from our crude, that is an anomaly. That would not happen. In fact, it is predicted to have a deep discount past 2019. So what is the way forward? I agree it is no easy task. I think an easy decision was to say close down the refinery rather than getting all the stakeholders, as Denise mentioned, to get to the table and see how we could address this issue. It would have to be clinical. It will be very difficult, but doable. It will involve, and I'm sure some of you all wouldn't like what I have to say, but I am from a finance background, so I'll say it. It will result in a cut in manpower numbers, a cut in salaries, wages, and some benefits. It may involve a 12-hour shift for refinery personnel, just like what happens on the Point Lisa's estate, a flattened organization. I improve procurement services for goods and services. And when I was there was a lot to be desired. We don't do proper due diligence on contractors and suppliers. And we employ their services, and we run into lots of cost overruns on projects. So due diligence is critical, especially in cases like in T&I work, in building floating platforms, rig rental, etc., we have to be sure that the people could execute what they say they could. It also requires a cultural shift in work ethics and attitude. And as I stand here before you today, I must say work ethics. I came from the Texaco era in the 1970s, in the mid-70s. And as Denise say, 7:15, admin take work for 7:15. Our bosses will be walking down the corridor and watching who not at the desk. They do it very subtly, but it is there. And you are very embarrassed if you reach late. Coffee break was no more than 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. If you stay in the coffee shop more than that, somebody will come looking for you. So we had a culture from the multinationals that we embraced and we produced. Somehow over the years, when the multinationals left, that culture left. Oh, I don't know if we as a people think because it's state enterprise, we could do anything. Even as a boss, people will come and tell me, I'm going to my child graduation, or going to a funeral. I said, it would be nice if you could ask, you know. But they take it for granted that they could take time off with no consequence of telling you, I will make up the time, you know. So we have lost productivity over years, and all of us are guilty of it, and all of us are conscious of it. Because if people get away with it, the good workers also start to do the same thing. So it will really be a shift in culture and an 8-hour day. When you come to work for 8 hours, you work for 8 hours. You don't take a coffee break for an hour and a lunch break for 2 hours and then pick up children 3 o'clock. We know our business cannot make profit if we have that kind of poor work ethics. Implementation of the Solomon Associates and Shell Global recommendations, and that is what we will have to move the margins forward. Tony talked about good governance, and really good governance, transparency, accountability, and consequence management is needed. And I like the idea of when we spend so much money on projects, we must be held accountable to it and report to the shareholder. And when there are cost overruns, there must be reasons for it and how we could bring it back on track. You know, we have a problem of just saying it's over budget, and like there's no limitation. We do hold people accountable for what they're going to do and have high consequences for if they don't do it. In terms of obsolescence, again, the financial statements, we write off a lot of obsolescence because we're buying materials and not using it. So after 5 to 10 years, we write it off on the books. Right now, I understand there's a boiler sitting down. Boiler is millions of dollars and not put in use, you know? Yet we could improve reduce our utility costs by doing all of these things. We have a SAP system that says the maintenance of your asset. Put the data in the system so you'll know whether to buy an asset or to repair it. So if we don't use the tools and the technology we have to drive the business, we will continue to lose money. So as I conclude, I would like to add that the process for leasing or divesting assets can take as long as 6 to 12 months, and Carolyn mentioned some of that. To collect and analyze data, it is no easy task. You cannot say you're closing down a refinery, or you cannot say you're bringing in somebody or you're leasing it. It is a long process. People have to review data and then make a decision. So I could go on and go on. As I said, I lived this industry for 30-something years. My father lived it for 45 years. This industry is very, very dear to me, and I'm sure all of us here today. I think it will be sad to see the demise of it, and I think we have to do everything we can to ensure that it stays. But remember, it will be hard work and hard work, really, really hard work, and we have to put our mind state if we do it and to collaborate with all the stakeholders. I thank you for this opportunity, and I am free to answer any questions you may have. Okay?
Thank you very much, Shriba. Okay, I have two requests for persons to speak, initially from the floor. So I'm going to ask them to contribute, and then it is all adding information and analysis, which I think is very important. So I'm going to first ask Mr. Robin Narayan Singh, who's president of the Petroleum Dealers Association, to say something to us this morning, because many of us are wondering what's going to happen to the price at the pump, now that he's Minister of Finance. And then Mr. Roy Lloyd, who came in, I'm not seeing him, oh, he's on that side there, right, who came in. Roy was also, you are VP Refining and Marketing, not so, Roy? No? General Manager Refinery. At Petrotrim, worked in the refinery for many years, and also was on the board of Petrotrim for a while, though he's not going to speak as a former board member, but somebody who's knowledgeable about refining, and was born in the same island that I was born in Jamaica many moons ago. So let us hear from Robin first, and then we'll take Roy, and then we're going to open it up. We'll just have an open mic session, and then if there are particular questions that people have, I will ask the various speakers to respond to questions. And then I will try to do a summary. I will try to, it's now what, about 11:30? So we're going to try to finish by 12 because we didn't provide lunch for you. Lunch is, I'm sure the hotel would love to sell you lunch, but that's on your bill, all right? So, Robin.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you for asking me to be here. First of all, I am not a public speaker. I'm just a gas station operator. Secondly, the introduction to David Abdullah was really well received by me because I looked at him on television and his kindness and everything that was said about him, I truly endorsed. The first speaker I had really interacted with before he came and spoke, and he talked about the petroleum industry. So I had with me a copy of the Petroleum Act, which our industry, which is a downstream industry, I know they call it downstream industry because I think they probably want to keep us down. They do not include us. They do not include us in energy sector meetings or stuff like that. However, the Act is very clear about what are our operations. We are totally controlled by regulations and government. They decide the pricing structure, how we operate. I know Mrs. Bechan was the chairman of National Petroleum, and she would have had some vision for National Petroleum. I don't know if it was achieved. I think she might want to tell us. And then she became the minister who in charge of the act that controlled from exploration to production to retailing, marketing, in all spheres that this act cover. And she would probably tell us the things that she would have tried to change in our industry, in the downstream industry. Because as I stand here today, we have not had a marketing license from the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And as the first speaker said, and that withholding of a marketing license make us, our industry, illegal operation. It took a court, I think it was Justice Carol Gobin, to say that the receipt we pay for the license is a de facto license. So it is under this guise of a de facto license the petroleum industry operates. That has not been corrected, and it continues to persist. With respect to, I don't want to keep you off too long, but in our industry, when you stop to think about it, the percentage or profitability is very, very minimal. There are lots of dealers out there suffers greatly for payment and payment of products. They can't buy gas. They buy it at minimal. Just there's fuel shortages, stockouts at gas stations. But there are some big gas stations along the highway, and there seems to have a move of moving away from communities to build gas stations on the highways. And I don't know why they do this. I don't know where they get this idea from, because if you buy your fuel, let's say in Faizabad, you could drive all around Trinidad and go back to your community gas station and still have gas in your vehicle. But I think it's some kind of aesthetic value to have it along the highways in Trinidad, and I think they want to do 2 or 3 more. And I don't understand the idea for that. But, when we talk about state enterprise, I agree with Denise Deming when Eric Williams talk about nationalism and nationalize certain industries. I bought into that. I really bought into that. Because what had happened, I remember as a young kid in the cadets in Presentation College, I marched from QRC to the Savannah. I think the royalty was there. My sister went and danced an Indian dance. And it was real patriotism that we were getting independence. And nationalism to me was very, very important. Until I realized the state enterprise does not bring nationalism to us. What it does, it impoverishes us. The people who make decisions are the ones who benefit from it. The executives on state boards and all of that enjoy all the perks. I would recommend that you do away with this state enterprise and allow people to invest their money in whichever state enterprise they think that is valuable to them. So they can hold their executive or their directors accountable for the decision that they make, not government. Government appoint their friends. But if you allow the citizens to buy into their company, whichever one it is, whichever state enterprise they prefer, they will hold their executive accountable. Every year you have shareholders meeting, and they will decide what is right for their company. This is just my observation, and this is what I think. And I'm glad I get to speak after the last speaker, because she said it really, really succinct. If you do not produce, you cannot get paid. It's simple as that, You can't afford, you cannot borrow money to pay your staff. And if you cannot produce, it goes hand in hand, And this is basically what I have to say, except that in our industry, the retail industry, the prices are fixed by the Minister of Energy in consultation with the Minister of Finance. And that is where usually they used to have consultation with the petroleum dealers. Now it's done in secret. And somebody say it's like shock and awe. I think it was David talk about shock and awe. So I don't know why the uncertainty. If you know prices are going up in 2 days' time or 3 days' time, you give people an opportunity to prepare themselves. But when you have this uncertainty, business needs stability. People need certain stability in their life. But when you have them in an uncertain atmosphere, you bring so much chaos and, You know, it doesn't make sense. I don't know why this prevailed at this time, but that is the way we've been operating, and we tend to like it this way, so nobody does anything about it. So with that, I think we just have to wait and see what happens tomorrow when the minister makes his pronouncement. Thank you.
And then after Roy, do we have another mic so that we could have roving in the audience? Okay, Javon has it. Great. Okay.
Morning. I'm one of the bad managers who helped to get Petrotrim where it is. So let's get that straight. Okay. I've spent about 32 years in the oil industry, 10 of which in Point Fortin and the rest in Pointe-à-Pierre. So I went through the closure of the Point Fortin refinery. It's not on a scale like this, but yes, we saw the type of trauma that happened to people who had built their lives around Point Fortin. And we saw the recovery. Okay, if you go down there now, you'll see it. But what struck me the most when I came to Pointe-à-Pierre was the sense of adversity that existed in Pointe-à-Pierre. And I will step on toes, I don't care. There was this feeling that the union and the company just couldn't work together. A mistrust, probably fear, because when we are afraid of something, it makes us hard to come together and talk the issues. I will recall one incident which I think my friend Calendar and Marchand probably helped to it, where a guy was close to retirement, and the union came to me and said he had no pension. He had not joined the pension plan. And so I asked, why? And it turned out that the union itself had told them in the early days with Texaco not to join the plan because it was something to take away their money. True or not, I don't. They had changed, of course, their stance and then encouraged people. But this poor fella either didn't take it all, whatever it is, he still believed it, so he never joined. So we had to go and do something down at benefit plans to help him. But it highlighted that whole sense that we can't work together because the other side has a secret plan to get me. You saw it in negotiations, where one side, we have no money, it's going to be zero this time. And the other side, we want 50%. At the end of the day, we would end up at some reality, 5, 6 if the times are hard, 10, 12 if times are supposedly good. We never were able to come together and say, look, this is what the company can afford. Let us come up with a proper plan for productivity payment, for an increase if it was worth it. So I hear the speakers, because in this sort of forum, it's easy to say, let's work together, yes. And we all go out there waving the flag. But when this daylight hits it, somehow it changes. But it's what is needed for different people to stop the adversarial relationship. Say, okay, I give up this, what you're willing to give up, and come up with something that is workable the best. We hear all the numbers, and I can't comment on the numbers because I was on the board up to just a little over a year ago it was. So I'll stay away from the technical issues. I don't see anything wrong with what came out in the public forum. But we're not going to really make a difference until we can tell people the truth. And that goes for everybody. So where are we going? What is it we want to achieve? And how we can achieve it together. And somehow bury the hatchet about mistrust. Not just in here where it's nice and comfortable, but when you go up there in the heat of the real world to really say that. So, David, you asked me to say something. That's really what I want to offer, that to the union members who are here and the leadership, maybe the government will hear also and maybe take some words of it and decide on what is the best thing. Tony made a good comment. No plant is going to live forever, you know. At some point in time, you're going to have to shut down the refinery. Just like the Point Lisa's plants, the economics will just become unsustainable after a certain time. The technology will die, whatever it is. They have a lifespan. As an engineer, we used to design around 20 years. We've gone way past that now. So there may be hard decisions to make, but we can make them together and try and come out with the best possible solution. Thank you.
Thanks, Roy. Okay, before Clyde responds to that, let me just explain. I think the pension, just for the benefit of everybody, the pension plan issue would have been probably a ex-Tesoro, BP Tesoro, Trintopec, then Petrotrim worker, because in the early 70s, shortly after Tesoro came in, the union had a big battle with the workers because the company offered them two options. One was, these were the transition between BP and Tesoro. The company offered workers either to get a gratuity lump sum based upon their years of service to that point, or to transfer that lump sum into the pension plan to buy back service. And the union, I read the pamphlets, I was in the union at the time, but the union said to the workers, transfer your lump sum into the pension plan, the new pension plan, to buy your past service. But some workers said, we want the cash. And that is one of the realities. And so relatively few actually transferred their money, and they took the cash. Some bought a taxi didn't last. Some bought land, perhaps that worked for them. Some spent it badly, and so on. And so when the union then had to negotiate pension plan improvements around 1980, which I was involved, and subsequently, we then had to try to get initially Trinidad Tesoro, later on Trintopec and so on, to agree to fund some of the past service benefits. And what happened was that there was a dual formula for those workers. Kamambach, I would remember, because he was an ex-Trintopec worker, a dual formula where the past service benefits for the workers who didn't transfer the money, their pension was calculated smaller, and then future service differently and so on. And I think that may have been one of the problems that we had. But the issue, I want to come to the issue of the adversarial thing. Let me just, not because Carolyn is here, we've said so quite publicly. When she was Minister of Energy, there was a collaboration where there was she spoke to me, I was in the Senate at the time, and then herself and Comrade Roger and myself sat down in the President General's office very quietly one evening or Sunday afternoon or something like that. And coming out of that discussion, there was a meeting at the Ministry of Energy, chaired by Carolyn, at which the company was present, the union, and technical people from the Ministry of Energy. And arising out of that, there was a tripartite team working in exploration and production to address the problem of declining oil production. And oil production, in fact, did increase for a short period of time. When she was removed as Minister of Energy, that tripartite process fell apart, and oil production started heading south again. So that was one. The Lashley Committee itself was the result of an engagement between the union and the government. I myself met with the Prime Minister, then I facilitated a meeting between the union, leadership and the Prime Minister, and it was there that there was agreement to establish the committee to review Petrotrim. So there are moments of engagement, but I think the key then happens when decisions get made where there is exclusion, and then the trust breaks down. And then once that begins to happen, the adversarial positions become entrenched. And so in a situation like this, because Petrotrim is a state company and we're dealing with the people's assets, oil and so on, the key responsibility in my own view is with the leader of the government to approach it in a particular way. But listening to what he said, that they went this way to keep the union out of any deliberations on the future of Petrotrim, if you start there, you're going to end badly. And the people will end up losing ultimately. And therefore, it is his inability to be able to then sit down and collaborate, and his insecurity in that regard that has got us to this particular point where we are at now. And so I want to just quote a proverb, which is a Japanese proverb, not because my mother is Japanese, but there was a proverb which says that vision without action is daydreaming, but action without vision is a nightmare. And so we took, well, not we, the board endorsed and approved by the cabinet, took a decision which is action without any vision whatsoever. No vision about what is to be the future of the industry, how best do we add value to the actual resources, given that we have a finite period perhaps of hydrocarbon exploitation, given climate change and all those other things. How do we maximize the value during the period that we can, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years, of a hydrocarbon industry in terms of oil production? How do we maximize that oil in the ground in terms of value, and therefore is not refining the best way to do that, and everything else? So there was action without vision, and when you have action without vision, you end up in a nightmare, which has been described so well this morning. I think we've got a lot of data. People have been attacking the union and myself and Carolyn to a lesser extent, because the public has been told that we don't know, and we're quoting figures, and we talk about depreciation, and we this, that, and the other, and so on and so on. But I think what we've been able to do today, in a very objective, dispassionate way, is to hear from people who have been within the industry, who know the figures, who know the details, and so on. And when I spoke to Shriba and Winston and Roy, I said, come and say what you wish. I mean, this is not a forum where we only want to hear one position. We really want to be able to hear from people who know what is to take place. Because the truth is, Mr. Espinay does not know. Doesn't know the industry, right? And when the Lashley committee met, Robert Riley and myself and Gregory Marchand, who's here and was a member of the committee, we had to be explaining to Mr. Lashley, what is our gross margin, what is net margin, what is transfer pricing, what is this, what is that, how the refinery operates, and so on. Just did not know, right? But yet is a person entrusted purely because perhaps he has a particular philosophical position which is in sync with the decision makers. But I'll come to the philosophical issues when I close off at the very end. Okay, so we've said a lot, so the floor is open. Let's try to keep it without statements and keep questions, because I think a lot of information has been presented. So if we could just have some questions that will elucidate, and we'll take maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 questions to get as many voices as possible from the floor before we get responses. There's a mic in the audience, one on the left.
Pleasant good day to all. My name is Clyde Calinder, ex-worker of Petrotrim, Texaco, you name it, 41 years service plus. Today is my 15th year of retirement. And I have enough of concerns, although I have been in the refinery sometime. David just say statements, but some things have been said. I think I have to respond to David. You see, Mr. Lloyd just told us about trust. And we have had serious problems with Texaco with trust. Himself, manager, dash, and otherwise with lies to the union and to workers. And let me make one statement. I remember 1995, we were in the Twin Towers negotiating. And about 3 in the morning, Mr. Dash said, Mr. McLeod, one of the worst things that have happened to this company was VSEP. But you know, when we came in the refinery in the morning to report to the workers were handing us VSEP letters that the company handed out to them the night. That's lies and deceit and deception. And we have had to work with that for years. We have had to work with lies and deception, with contract and contract work, and to shut down the refinery to make sure that the permanent workers do the shutdown. And the company with boast that is the best shutdown that they have had. When the workers did it, we didn't have to return, the radio workers didn't have to return now to refix what the contractors were doing. So I must make some statements, David, based as president, spent many years as president of the branch, and I can't sit down here and hear this. I've heard Mr. Paul say something and I disagree with him. You see, because I think it maybe one or two other officers here. We sat down with the company on many hours on this sellout, I will call it, to our oil, you know. Come at Berkeley and us sat down hours. We proved that we had workers not doing anything. We also set up a date, a Sunday, for the President General and others to go down in the field to restart a drilling program, and the company didn't respond. Lease out, farm out has killed us. I work as a custody transfer agent, and we found lease out operators thieving the company oil. We reported it, and they stopped us from going in the fields. David, they stopped us from going in the fields. So the leasehold operator could have done what he wanted in the field. They were thieving the company oil. And all the recommendations we made for us to have the regular workers retain it, they didn't do it. We had company officials leaving the company work and going as company, as leasehold operators. So we're talking. I don't know, my dear friend. I have some comments working here. I don't know about no 3-hour lunch break. I don't know about that at all. There must be the manager of them wasn't that. Not the ordinary worker. Because we had to clock in and clock out. So I don't know about that. So we have had some wrong information. We have had lies from management or otherwise as to workers' salary. No worker. We don't have a cutlass man in Point Up here. And we see the minister go and say, cutlass men making $600 an hour. We see, say, here, tea makers working for $300 an hour. You know that. Which part in Point Up here we have tea maker? I don't know. So that these things and lies that is going on to the country, how do we trust that when the lies are going on in that way, when the lies are going on in the company against us, I can trust company officials, and Mr. Lloyd know that, the kind of battle we have had to get things regulated in Point Up here. We have had to do things in Point Up here, I'm making statement, David, that we had to shut down all the contracts. And same Chantak and others had to arrange a meeting in the staff club, in the club, to bring all the contractors to be spoken to by the union and the company to do what is right. So lies, 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 lies. So that some other things, may I want to ask a question, but I'm leaving that. I'm just dealing with some of the things that come out and the actions that we had to take in point of here. Let me tell you what we used to do and find them now. You're finishing now. I will send the secretary and an ex-officer, the vice president and an ex-officer. I and Lincoln will go by Ben Dash. One will go by Frank Sampson. One will go by Robinson and others. We go on with the same question. And after that morning meeting, every officer will come back with a different answer from the different managers. So we say, Ben Dash, what is the truth? Because you just tell us something, this one tell us something, this one tell us something, so we have been dealing with lies, onward lies, so that the union have had to be aggressive in point of here to bring about right decisions. And when you have managers like that is the situation come out of it. Hold on.
Okay, thanks, Clyde, for sharing that cultural experience. I think it comes back to what Denise is saying about culture, and I know that, you know, from the Texaco days, there was no trust. Yeah.
Comrade Chairman, all protocols observed. I understand that my friend Harris Khan has something in the papers today. I am one of the people who helped develop people like Harris Khan and others. They say that there are 26,000 occupations on this planet, and people like me are supposed to be able to help you to practice in any of those 26,000 occupations. A curious thing happened today. Harris Khan and I agreed to meet. You see, years ago, when Harris Khan came into the training department, he was making some decisions. I'm not about money for me. Somebody asked me one day if I know how much money I could make with the knowledge I have, and if I can take that and train apprentice. If I didn't do that, how would I get Harris Khan? Harris and I are going to meet again, and I'll share a brief anecdote. I have a friend named Trevor, and one day he showed up by my door in a beer. Knock, bang, bang, bang. And he looked like when you wet a blackened chicken. He said, "Oh God, Jim, your partner in trouble." And before I could get him some refreshments or hot tea, he said, "Oh God, all my years in industry, all my high school, all my degree, all my experience, oh God, Jim, a laborer could do something I can't do. Help me." He was going to take a bed of sand out of the Mirox plant and planning where you're going to put the crane and how many men he will need and what he's going to tell the contractor, and he's doing the calculations. And a laborer was coming to him. He said, "You're going, Chief?" He said, "I go down." He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'll empty this." He said, "When?" He said, "As soon as possible, but he's busy writing and doing the calculations." He said, "Right now?" He said, "Yeah, if I could get it now." He said, "Go back. Go back, go back. Go back a little more. Go back a little more." The laborer connect a water hose to the vessel, and he pull a lever, and all the gravel on the ground. No crane, no contractor, no man hours, no contract. Harris and I are going to team up about ordinary working people. All of you with all the big talk and things. You know what they say in the book on industrial and organizational psychology? A worker can reduce his productivity by as much as 66%, and his immediate supervisor will not know. Go ahead with the big talk. And leave out the humble man, the laborer, and the sweeper, and the water carrier. I know people who come from Marbella and come and collect water. They went home and had a bout of yellow fever. Go ahead. Leave out the little man. You don't come. You have a big degree, I think. You'll come like the permanent secretary who show up in our apprentices and mentors forum. What is the problem? He gone down some DME nonsense in Point Library. And he told his principal, well, you see those 200 men by the gate? I'm going to recruit them, train them, and put them to work. Simple enough. You know he come and bothered me about? He went and handed them forms to go for a drug test. 200 forms. Only 2 of them come back. The first step a manager needs to be able to carry out is to recruit. He can recruit from 200 people, enough people to do his work. Go ahead. Ignore little people. I call up my friend who is a pastor in library. I swear to her. He said, but them boy can't pass no drug test. You know, he now finding out that the thing that are sniff and thing have huge financial and medical benefits. You know something? I'm going to close now. I was a student in the junior technical school, $3.50 a term. I don't have the $3.50. I have $180 that are thief. Everybody in school knows I have an allowance of $180, and I can keep that up for the 2 years I'm in school. I have an allowance. But the Old Boys Association paid. Listen, I went to Mr. Burgess one day, and I started getting reports about the people in technical school, now the University of Trinidad and Tobago. I said, Mr. Burgess, what's wrong with this school now? What has gone wrong? This man gave me naught in maths, but I still had to come first in class, you know. Don't feel I lost that scholarship, I ain't coming first in class. He said, my boy, there was a time you came here to make men. Now you can come to make money. That was wrong with our training institutions. But Harris and I will meet, and we will talk, and we do what is necessary to make people able to do the job, including the ability to give your boss an order and make him obey you. Harris, thanks for reaching out to me. So you see what they say, when I told them what to do about Harris Khan, instead of doing it, they go around and tell everybody I don't like Indian people. Me, who have family name Rajasthan, Singh and Ramdeen and Sharifa and Harun, I don't like Indian people. Go ahead, man. You're making a mistake, friend. What is okay? The Calypsonians say, what you get, you will take.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Comrade, for sharing some very important insights into understanding the value of work and what work is. I think that's very, very important. The late Pat Bishop once gave the C.L.R. James lecture for the union, and the title of her address was what is work and what work is. Okay, can we try and get some other questions and so on? We've had quite a few comments. Oh, sorry, Fabiola. I thought you were just holding the mic for someone. Sorry. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you. So my question relates to the cost of lifting oil. So it's been said that our cost is higher than international standards. But if you need to be in the Middle East and have a huge operation to get like a price or a break-even cost of $20, is there anything we could realistically do to compete with that? And I'm asking because I'm also thinking about the fracking companies, like in the US, who have very high costs, but they still can operate depending on prices. Since there's so many informed people, I would just like to know.
Sure. Okay, we'll take a note of that question. And Fabiola Whittier, of course, has connections to Point-à-Pierre. Brother used to be a union officer. Father was a manager maintenance in Point-à-Pierre. Okay, another question?
Yes.
Comrade Jackman, who is president of the Point-à-Pierre branch of the union.
Hi, good day, everyone. I wanted to get some advice from persons who will be able to be knowledgeable on the matter, basically. Forecasting the effect, I'm not hearing much people talking about it, but NIS contributions. What what do you forecast will be the effect not only on us here, but the country with respect to the loss in NIS earnings, right? As well, I'm not hearing people speaking to the fact that Petrotrim subsidizes the cost for more gas in the industry. I think the last figure I would have heard was that we still have outstanding approximately $1 billion that is supposed to be paid to Petrotrim. If you look at the books, I believe, I could be wrong, the books reflect that the payments are made, but we have not yet received that cash. What now will happen if Petrotrim is to transfer that burden to NP or to other persons? I think that's something we need to speak to as well. And then we have the issue of the bitumen supply to the country. I don't think that was ventilated here as well. We will now have to consider importing bitumen, which is another foreign exchange cost. So I don't know if anyone could speak to those three items.
Okay, thanks a lot. Get some more? Nigel White.
Yes, good morning. Nigel White is the name. Chairman Operation. While listening, I heard Mr. Tony Paul mention about the fact that you could blame everybody, and we blame ministers, blame management, but the thing is to blame ourselves. My question is that if we have to blame ourselves today, then where did it all begin? You know, why are we not, as a people, interested in moving together to make sure the change is necessary for what's supposed to happen? You know, because I hear we say, you know, all of us is to blame inside here, because we're not holding anyone accountable. But if we are in that mode, where or when did that all begin? Two, in just a little comment here, I hear the government say that we'll be losing some $2 billion. It will cost us $2 billion a year in terms of Petrotrim if we continue the refinery. But I think in the budget, we may see an increase in national security by $2 billion. We may see an increase in health by $1 billion. And we may see an increase in social services by some $500 million, which will come up to $3.5 billion. So would it be more feasible that if we had keep Petrotrim and it costs us $2 billion, then it costs us $3.5 billion, my saving at $1.5 billion? And thirdly, with all the information and minds in this room, what are we all prepared to do? Because I'm not hearing this information being exhausted as much as it should be to put the pressure on the government to change their minds and their position. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, you have to, we're live streaming, so we need to hear it through the microphone, Stephen.
Morning to all. Thanks for coming. I think we are here to hear some talk, yes. We were well educated today. And I think we are all here, I take it for granted that we are against the closing of the refinery, okay? I think that's why we're here. And in as much as we heard, it's a pity the public out there really couldn't hear or wouldn't hear what was said here today by these speakers. I want to thank you all because although I started working in Texaco days at 14 years of age, youngest ever, I made 40 years, I was a shop steward, I was fired as a union shop steward. Good sense prevailed and they did the right thing, taking me back on the job. They didn't go to court, as much as I wanted to, settled. I became a president of the branch, Panellists branch, and that profit sharing you're talking about, somebody was talking about recently. Not the 3 hours lunch, we never negotiated that. I didn't see it happen in my time, I don't think it will ever happen. I want to say I was part of that. I enjoyed myself at Texaco, the professional oil company that left here. And they were leaving. That's why we said Texaco must go. People thought we ran them out just like that. People must understand Texaco was packing up slowly. And it wasn't for the OWTU, Comrade George Weeks, who was a soldier with my father in the army, British Army. We might have lost more or paid more for less. But what we didn't do is what we are attempting to realize now that we should do if this happens the other way around. But all of the questions we're asking here about bitumen and everything, with all due respect to everybody, it's valid. It can only be answered, honestly, if we turn back this thing. And I was hearing Comrade Abdullah sing in a COP meeting up, symposium recently, this week here. We got to turn it back. And everybody here wish it could turn back. But we can't wish it turn back. We got to look like Comrade Kumlal Singh here, who people say, we fighting. He could be the government. He is one man. He did more by himself, sorry to say it like this, than many of us here did in our lifetime. That Comrade Kumlal. And when I saw him here, that's why I decided to speak, because I said that he sacrificed more than me. And I think I did a lot, and still I feel I did nothing. I want us to understand here, all of us belong to all the parties in Trinidad and Tobago. Comrade Roger represents all the members of all the parties in this country. Right? And right now among us, some of us, right here, and outside here, he is the rogue in Trinidad and Tobago. And that's the only person getting everybody else to represent Trinidad and Tobago, to show patriotism. Comrade Roger. So nobody big him up to now in this country, because he's not of a party. Let me tell you that. Because we don't know about patriotism. We know about patriotism. Right? So what is happening in the country right now is somebody is pulling his people that way and talking about Roger going with people who he couldn't get along with. They're going back together for that foolishness again. And his people say, yay. Right? He didn't remember that just over a year ago, no, over 2 years, nearly 3 years, a little over 3 years ago, we weren't walking with Rowdy. I'm saying it openly. He was walking with Roger for help to move somebody else who did the same thing, walking behind Roger, not walking with them, walking behind Roger to get our job done. Do something like so. Right? But what is happening in this country and has happened over the past years, since I know myself, is this. Leaders of parties, with all due respect to all protocol, due respect to everybody, the problem we face is this. No leaders of any parties in this country ever had the testicular fortitude of a male, or whatever it was to be female, to stand up and get together like this. This is, well, present here. This is Rowley, Kamla, everybody. Get together like this. Anytime leaders get together to solve a problem, I'm coming to this problem now because this is a problem we could solve. The masses, as the forces do this, as the leaders do this, automatically the masses do this. Right? And that is success. But you know why it don't happen? This is my corner. That is your corner. So don't blame anybody for 3 hours lunch and 1 hour tea and ain't care about nothing. Because there are people in this country I know don't care. And the people that care, looking like the people that bad. Comrade Roger care. He has been asking for a forensic audit into Petrotrim since when he became president 9 years ago. And workers and managers were saying, no. That's why it didn't happen. We are prepared now to change that culture. If we turn around this, that wouldn't happen. This will happen again. What I want to ask us, and I want to be short, is this. There's a plan to try to turn this around. And no matter how you talk about presenting new plans to save the country, I will save Petrotrim. Petrotrim is not Point Up our oil workers one. Petrotrim is Trinidad and Tobago. The only people who can save Petrotrim is Trinidad and Tobago. Give the people a chance to save the company and save the country. You can't tell 3,500 save the company, save the country, and go home. That's your reward. That's not how it's supposed to be. And if we know it wrong, we're supposed to get licks for it. We're supposed to get licks to save it. We're supposed to face whatever is it out there that we don't want to face in blue shirt to save this country. We have to be able to get together before the march takes place and talk to this Prime Minister, demand that all parties and groups and unions demand he come to the table and talk. We haven't done that yet. We're going one by one. And he's slapping you and embarrassing one by one. The last thing he says is this. They're talking to the board. But that girl, I still ain't doing that. He's showing you no matter where you bring, even success, he ain't taking that. I want to warn us. Let us get out in the rain and the sun. The only way to stop this thing is by being unpopular. The right thing, ladies and gentlemen and comrades, is the right thing. The best thing is not always the best thing, the popular thing. Sorry, the best thing sometimes is the popular thing, but the right thing is the right thing. I close by asking us to understand. Put our petty differences together, get this job done, and after that, let us do the right job. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. I know that I've kind of allowed a little bit of time for people, but we're really going to have to ask people to be shorter going forward because already 20 past 12, okay? So I see one more hand there. I'll come back to you, Winston, in a while. So I see one hand there and then Sharon at the back. Any other hands? Okay, one more, two more, okay? And then we will try to get, and then we'll get Winston and then some closing comments. Yes?
Yep.
The brother in the shirt? Oh, Gregory. So I missed you, sorry. All right, so we start with Gregory. We'll go from left to right.
Yes, good afternoon. I just want to address the question of collaboration and good faith negotiations. Now, since 2000, Petrotrin is the only company I know in Trinidad and Tobago where a mediation center was established. Since 2004, we have been working on this project. And this project was comprised of a committee of all the major stakeholders, right? The OWTU, NPSA, NPSA, the EPA, and management, right? And for years, we worked on that project, and it was officially launched in 2013, right? We had been doing informal mediation. When I say informal, we had been doing it before the center was established, where parties would meet and mediate as part of the dispute resolution process. And that's what we were hoping that would have been a prominent part of the Petrotrim dispute resolution process. Now, in 2013, the mediation center was launched. And the hope, one of my hope, right, because I retired in 2013, but one of my hope was that it would have been an integral part of the culture so that the most difficult issue could be put on the table and discussed by the major stakeholders. Unfortunately, we see in this impasse where there was a lack of that, especially from management especially, from the board and from the government, to really meet with the stakeholders and try to come up with the best options or discuss various options and see how is the best way to move forward. So there was a lack of that from the very beginning. Now, my interpretation is that there was some directive from the executive to do exactly what's being done now. And that might be one of the reasons why the immediate past chairman resigned, Mr. Jupiter, resigned. Because in my interpretation, he could not carry out that directive in good conscience. As somebody from the oil industry, somebody who born and grew up in it, somebody from Point, could not carry out the directive from the executive in good conscience, and he resigned. That is my interpretation. Now, from the time Mr. Espinette came into Petrotrin, all he started to talk is all the bad things, what management bad, workers bad, everything bad. And that was his approach. And he was able to carry out the mandate as directed by the executive. That is my interpretation. It has no reason why it couldn't have the major stakeholders come in to one table and discuss and come up with options and try to see if they could come up with the best option.
Okay, thank you very much. Which is what the memorandum of agreement between the union and the board was supposed to arrive at, but that never got implemented. Yes.
Good morning to all, Chairman and the head table. I am not a Petrotrim worker. I must start with that. But I have a lot of friends, associates, relatives who are Petrotrim workers. When I heard about this, by virtue of the fact that I have a little background in trading at a retail aspect of trading, the normal Forex sort of thing, I kind of got a sense of what could I have done as a citizen who is concerned about the fallout, because this is our breadbasket. And we would appreciate and understand that if this goes down, this whole country, and by extension the Caribbean, is going to be affected in a tremendous fashion. Now, the thing is, I spoke with one or two of the local businessmen with whom I'm aligned. One is Mr. Ramner, and he's here this morning. And we decided, listen, we have a merchant bank that would have wanted to come on board. We spoke with them, and they would have wanted to come on board, and it would have cost the state little or nothing. Just providing a 20% value in terms of what they want, 20% guarantee, and they would have been able to get the monies that they want. We were looking at, when we looked at the 850 of the bullet payment, and also the bailouts and that sort of thing, and also for the low sulfur plan, we were looking at about 2.2 billion US. We had discussed it with them. Only one person, one party took up the challenge. We spoke with the union, and they seemed in the first instance to be most amenable. We made some attempt to talk with the company. We did get a minimal hearing, but the essence of what we are saying is it would have cost nothing, because the plan was simply this. If it is that you provide a 20% guarantee, the bank would have drawn down on the 100%, pay the bullet payment, use a sinking fund. They have a trading platform. They would have traded, and within a short space of time, you have all the money that you needed to do what you have to do. Now, that's the most simplistic aspect of it. The thing is, I'm surprised, shocked, concerned that something like this was not given the due attention, because we would have put it out in particular forums. Nonetheless, I am saying if it has to get to that, we want to put something on the table also for those workers who have to go. You can be guaranteed 4% on your money every month, continuously, so that that could be something that could be a cushion, and that's just something that is offered. So the thing is, folks, if it has to come, unfortunately it has to come, but the Petrotrim should not close. There should be some alternative arrangement, and I agree with the parties that said that this is the patrimony of the citizenry, and it is the citizenry who has to stand up and get this thing going. Outside of that, we would have a fallout that for years to come, our children and our children's children are going to pay the price. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Okay. Winston, I'll come back to you last, okay, if you don't mind, because somebody may pose a question to you as well. Sharon, and then Ernesto. I didn't see any other hands. Joe Remy. Okay, I think, okay, so I was looking from my left to right, so I think Joe Remy was the last person who got a hand. Oh, sorry, yes, sorry. Yes, Ms. Clegon. All right, so Sharon first, and then we'll come forward.
Okay, what I would like to try to understand, I would like the panel, if they can, to explain it to me. What would be the ripple effect for us poor people coming down the line should Petrotrim close? Because I'm not hearing anybody talking about what the price of gas will be, what is cooking gas or car gas, what the price of food will be. How are we as poor people, because at the end of the day, when the ripple effect takes place, the poor people are the ones who will suffer. And I'm not hearing anybody, or even if Trinidad and Tobago really understand what is the effect of Petrotrim closing, the effect of our pockets, how are we surviving, how are we sending our children to school. And I don't think Trinidad and Tobago understand what is going to happen. So could people tell me, somebody explain that to me, what is the effect it is going to have on me as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago?
Very good. The mic in front, Sharon, sorry.
Ms. Abdullah, excuse me, I'm not Miss Cleghorn.
Sorry. Because you're sitting next to Andrea, sorry.
She's my niece,
She's
right?
your niece, all right.
Well, we have learned a lot of information here this morning. I am not a Petrotrin worker, but I have a lot of family who worked in Petrotrin. But my one question is, I know that everybody in this room does not want Petrotrin to close. My question is, if Petrotrin should close, what will happen to St. Peter's private primary school?
Okay, thank you very much.
I taught at St. Peter's for 11 years, and my heart is there.
Thank you. All right, Ernesto.
Pleasant morning, Comrade Chair, Comrade Leader, members of the...
No, it's afternoon.
Oh, I'm still
we're running over
back in time. Yes. So pleasant morning, all protocols observed at the head table, and pleasant morning to all gathered here. My name is Ernesto Kiza. Today I am the elections officer of MHD at this point in time. So I am not, I can't help it. I will talk a little union thing, but I have two particular questions that I would like to ask. The first question is, and I noticed some legal minds in the audience here. How do we reconcile the head of the political head of Trinidad and Tobago coming out openly in a newspaper article in the Newsday, I think it was Thursday gone, openly saying that the main reason, my words, I'm paraphrasing my words, that they had to shut down the refinery is because of the Oilfields Workers Trade Union refusing to discuss the cutting of staff. Or, again, in my words, he said they would not have, the OWTU would not have agreed with retrenchment and staff cuts. When it is also public knowledge, and I'm talking particularly to the legal people in this room, I'm seeing a couple of them, there was, and still is, a memorandum of understanding dated the 3rd of April, 2018, where the entire memorandum is based on restructuring. And restructuring at that time included restructuring staff. So I am very confused. That's one. My second question has to do with the issue of investment. I heard the gentleman speak a little while ago that as a local investor, my words again, he and his partner came, and the only person that gave him a night or day in terms of an hearing was the union. And our President General, Comrade Roger, has been making the point, skillfully, as he normally do, because I imagine soon it will all come out, the truth will come out. My question is it really truth that the government is not going to sell the refinery, or does not have any, or has not entertained any bids or anybody? Because I'm not totally confident that it's only the gentleman and his colleague. I'm sure other mega local business conglomerates and so on may have approached the government, I'm sure, because the information that's out there, a lot of international interests would have been lurking. You would have been seeing a lot of reports in the newspaper about Perenco and Shell and so on. And in other words, Comrade Chair, I am a bit dissatisfied, a bit confused. If you clear all the rhetoric, all the political rhetoric, the leader of this country is unable to be consistent in his statements. And I would like to know that, and I'm talking to the members of the head table there, particularly the former Minister of Energy, I don't think it's consistent behavior that you are going to close down an asset, knowing fully well the value of the asset, not only to Trinidad and Tobago in terms of its business value, its monetary value, and so on, and to sell to the public that you're not going to open it back, you're not going to sell it, when you very well know that that particular asset or group of assets is critical to GDP in some form in the next, either in its present form or in some other form to which you may want to, have it develop over time. And finally, Comrade Chair, it is time the workers of Trinidad and Tobago, those that are of the advanced working class, as in Petrotrim, NP and WASA and so on, those of the middle and the lower, it is time we really assess our political options for real. The politics of red and yellow does not favor the voting population. It favors a very small, influential group. I'm not saying 1%. That's a cliche term. I'm not saying that. A small group of people constantly benefiting in the mass, because there are businessmen in this room here and businesswomen in this room who know the pain that they go through with the change of administration. And it's not that they don't contribute when parties come to them and ask for contribution. That's not that they don't do that. But the fact remains, the people that vote continuously, rigorously, and put on red and yellow jerseys, and campaign and fight each other, families that are yellow and red and yellow in the family, and so on, and go against and don't speak to each other, hate each other after elections. What does that come down to? Do you benefit from that? Is there any real benefit for voting red and yellow? As I'm talking about as a nation. Do you get contracts? Because that is the partisan nonsense. That's the nonsense. You are promised you promise the moon and the stars, and it doesn't happen. I'm saying, Comrade Chair, it is time for a different type of governance in this country. It is time for a governance that involves all. All. A different type of governance. And I can't stand on my feet and then say, vote MHD. Have a pleasant evening, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ernesto. All right. Joe Remy. And let me just say, in terms of the Javon Eiffel, who is one of our MSJ activists, and together with the people who are doing our Facebook live streaming, informed me just a short while ago that this event has reached more than 20,000 people, and there are some 2,000 plus clicks. And I suppose we have to differentiate between how many people were reached and how many people are actually viewing. So it's less people viewing, but people know about it. Once you reach them, it means that they've known about it. And there's some 871 engagements, which means that people would probably have commented or shared what is going on. So we are reaching a wider audience. And I just want to thank to Javon in particular, and the company that is helping to live stream for getting the message out beyond this room. Yes, Joe? And I know Gregory Fernandez is on that side and wanted to say something very quickly. So Gregory, and then Winston will be our last person from the floor.
Yeah, thanks so much, David, and pleasant good afternoon to everyone. And I tried to straddle the hat somewhere now, so it's difficult to speak from one perspective, but I heard Sister Damon, and I would want to just relate an experience, and it's the similar experience I'm seeing happen here. We went through this with TDC. People forgetting the whole TDC experience. We presented an alternative plan in consultation with every stakeholder in the tourism industry. 2 years now, what has happened to tourism in Trinidad and Tobago, when they felt that closing down TDC was the best option. And I'm saying we don't learn from our experiences, and the government is hell-bent on going in one direction, despite all that you provide as alternatives. And I think we need to, I like what Comrade Tang said, we need to step back and push back this thing. Because if it is not pushed back, it is going to be pushed down our throats. And I don't think that they would have studied the impact, the socio-economic impact of closing down the refinery. Now with my credit union hat, and we never wanted to go public, but someone went public and make a statement and tried to have a run on credit unions and unit trusts. indigenous institutions that are geared to treat a certain kind of people. And the credit union, TechU in the first instance, had to respond publicly, because we deliberately said that if you go and say anything publicly on the impact that this is going to have on credit unions, you're going to encourage a run on credit unions. What they have done now is encourage a run on credit unions, and people are running and taking the money to go where? To the commercial banks. It's all a concerted plot, deliberately designed to create a particular impact. They are going at the unit trust because they are saying, no, unit trust. People are now running away from unit trust because of mortgage and all kind of thing. People are running to unit trust to try and take out the investment and go to the commercial banks. And I think I am disappointed in, and this is something that I know a lot of people are like, I'm disappointed in the amount of money we spent on GATE to educate our own citizens, and they are not saying anything now to give us a good return on our investment, to say that the decision to close down Petrotrim is not a good one, and they're taking partisan political positions. And we need to call back those monies, you know, because something has to be done. And there is no way I can see any logic in the decision. It is impacting on both sides of the fence. And credit unions, we have about 5 credit unions who are directly involved in the Petrotrim environment. Nobody did a study to understand the impact this is going to have on the communities that they represent. You have Labre, Point Fortin, you have Pinal, Marbella, San Fernando, Palo Seco, Santa Flora. You're talking about the whole Southwest Peninsula, because the Southwest chapter represents the entire Southwest Peninsula. The whole Southwest Peninsula will be economically affected by this, and nobody is taking on these things and talking it out loud. And I think we have to start to push back, and push back forcefully, because if we don't, they're going to force this decision down our throats, and we're going to end up like TDC. I'm seeing all kind of articles, what happened in Maracas, what happened here, what happened there when they closed down TDC. Absolutely nothing has developed positively with tourism since that bad decision was taken. And it's the same thing going to happen with Petrotrim. And I think that we need to hear more of our intelligent, so-called intelligent persons standing up to the government. You know what some persons told me in the TDC issue? I agree with you all, you know, but I can't go public because my contract might be affected. That is the kind of selfishness that permeates this society, from people that we train with our own taxpayers' money, send them and get GATE, and they are now saying, if I only talk, I may not be involved in any work with the government going forward. This thing has to stop. And I was impressed with the presentation by Carolyn, because I felt the data is important. Data is important. And we have to, that data should be shared with us, because I would like to talk to it in different forums, because we have to reach out to our people, you know, in the communities. I live in a fence line community. I live in Gasperlo. Gasperlo, you walk into Petrotrim, that's how it is. They are going to be severely impacted, small businesses on the junction going up the road. And I'm glad the Gasperlo Chamber person is here. They are going to be impacted. Have we done any studies to determine how these things are going to affect these fence line communities and the small business sector, which we seem to want to promote much more because of the diversification of our economy? We have to really stand up strong in this instance. And I would hope everyone here has the position that the refinery or the Petrotrim must never be closed as an entity. The issue I agree with is that it needs to be restructured. How the restructuring take place must be done in collaboration with the recognized majority union. And a prime minister ought to be brought to task for making those, well, Israeli doty statements in public. He's playing smart with foolishness. That is really playing smart with foolishness. And I know from the beginning it was a union busting tactic, because the same thing they did with TDC, as soon as we got recognition and was on the verge of signing our first collective agreement to close down TDC, it's the same thing. Get rid of the union, get rid of the progressive trade unions, because they will bring about a different kind of representation inside it. And we have to stand up strong and fight back against this one. Let me repeat it again. We need to get to our intelligent persons, who so-called intelligent persons who we had paid to educate, and they have to be making the noise while we hit the streets and push back against this uncaring government. Thanks much.
Thanks, Joe. As the mic has been passed, let me just ask Fabiola, the ODB2's alternative document, the entire 32 pages, is online? I'm asking. It is. Where? Okay. Is it on the ODB2's website as well? All right. Well, what we will do, we'll put, the MSJ website is a little bit more proactive than the ODB2's website, because Javon updates it every couple of days once we have new material to put up. So we will also put it up on the MSJ website. You all may have collected a little brochure when you came in, so the website information is there. Because some of the analysis, Joe, that Carolyn presented, not all, but some of it in terms of the financials, we didn't have, well, maybe careful, OWTU did not have the August financial statements when the statement was written, but some of that analysis in deconstructing the government's argument is in the OWTU's document. So you should have that available. And I think we did collect everybody's email addresses here, so that what we can also do as MSJ to facilitate information flow is to email the OWTU's alternative plan. And if Carolyn and Shriba would be so kind as to give us your presentations, we will email that out to everyone as well to share the information, because information is critical. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a very simple statement, which is that I believe all of us here should be doubly worried. And the reason I'm saying that is the government has not been even able to handle the situation with the boat at Tobago. So far less to handle something as complex as this, that you should be doubly worried about this situation, right? They have proven, since they have come to power, that they are very incompetent. And this is something that everybody must recognize. And the whole manifestation of how that board went about this is a clear evidence of this, right? Because in the first instance, I remember Mr. Espine coming on the news and saying that the company make 82 million. And then within months, the company lose 2 billion and are shutting it down. And I don't know who gave Mr. Espine and the board the authority to take such a decision, right? Given the importance of Petrotrim to this country, right? Mr. Espino don't even live in Trinidad, right? And I think we need to seriously look at challenging the government, not just from the point of view of the fact that they're closing down Petrotrim, but the fact that they are very incompetent. Because the implications of this, they have not studied. I remember when the minister in the Ministry of Finance went on television right after they made the announcement, and Hima Ramprasad asked her, what about the fallout? She was caught off guard, and she bawled, well, we're going to see about putting some projects in South. That was the response. It was not thought through, and the implications of this, everybody should be very scared, because they are very incompetent. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Gregory, if you just bring the mic on to Winston on this side. Yes, and yesterday the Minister of Work said that the repairs to the Cabo Star, which was supposed to be completed in 10 days, will now be extended. And the Galleons Passage, which was supposed to start operations during the July-August vacation to assist with the huge flow of persons to Tobago for the long vacation, that Galleons Passage still can't get out of Trinidad. So Gregory is absolutely right in that regard. Winston?
Yeah, I just want to address the issue of the so-called deregulation of the market. As you're aware, and this should be of concern to the Petroleum Dealers Association, your wholesale price, your retail price, your wholesale margin, your retail margins are all fixed by the government. If you're talking about deregulating the market and you're talking about going to market forces and market prices, what is going to happen is, are you going to be allowed to determine your own margins? Is this going to be a big fallout in the number of service stations you have and all your employees? Have these things been discussed? Have you considered this? These are additional implications of the decisions that they're taking that you're not aware of and you're not clear of.
Okay, thank you. Shubal, any closing comment by you or response to any of the questions? Oh, sorry. Okay, let me just get the president of the Gasparillo Chamber, who is here, who was himself a former Petrotrin operator, I think.
Hi, good morning to the head table. Sorry, afternoon. I've been to a number of consultations with respect to Petrotrim, and everyone has the same concern. I have one question. What are we going to do about this? What are we going to do? This South Trinidad, we know the far-reaching implications of shutting down Petrotrim. As Mrs. Bechan said it, the economy that resonates out of Petrotrim and the far-reaching is not 10,000, it's hundreds of thousands of people going to suffer. Gasperlo, we are very, very concerned because we have about 30 plus businesses just involved with the chamber that does business directly with Petrotrim, service companies, contractors. Then you have the contracted employees. A lot of people migrated into Gasperlo because of the geographical advantage, working shift and thing. When you have all these people and the cash flow is affected, small business will suffer. They now will have to downsize to try and survive. So now you have an additional unemployment growing. I mean, the far-reaching consequences. I don't think we grasp in that. And I want to ask, what are we, as responsible citizens, going to do about it? Are we going to let the government get away with this? Because I have a friend in TNTech, they send them some managers, and they're targeting 3,000 TNTech employees already. I spoke to him 2 days ago. They're already saying 2,000 wasa. This is what is going to happen. We really have to take stock. And I just want to make one observation. So the media left because they had to go and cover something else. But I'll tell you something. Is only one camera they have? Our chamber will be live tomorrow, and they're going to do it all over, TV6 and a number of them. They're going to have cameras all over the country, interviewing chambers and business people. But today, you only have one camera.
Thanks, Mr. Ramjit. Very important point. And in summing up, I'll try to suggest something that can be done. Shuriba, any closing comment? No? Or response?
No, I just want to endorse what everybody said in terms of the rippling effects and the impact on the country. I know it will affect hundreds of thousands. People sitting down in North feel it wouldn't affect them, but all businesses. In fact, I did a little analysis. It will be hundreds of thousands of people will be affected. And these cannot be absorbed overnight. There will be no middle class again in Trinidad. People will be starving, and it will affect all the market vendors. People will can't buy proper food. Yeah, crime will increase. It is a situation we cannot, and I said cannot with emphasis, allow to happen. So, as Comrade Roger say, resole your shoes and get ready to march throughout the country, up and down, until this decision is reversed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shuriba. Well, we just get the closing comments and responses to some of the questions from the panelists.
Just one brief comment. Just one brief. I know you're running late. I just want to say, there's nothing strange, there's nothing weird, there's nothing uncanny about the way this administration has handled the Petrotrin issue. It is reminiscent of how successive administrations in this country has treated the citizenry, the people, the lands, the assets of this country that belong to the people. David, your comment about that Japanese quote, the first part is also extremely important. Vision without action is daydreaming. I commend the panel. It's an excellent job you do because, of course, clarification of issues, presenting facts, statistics, the information, putting it out there is very important. It's critical because it gives way to more informed discussion. But I'm just reiterating what a lot of people have said here. What are we going to do in terms of moving forward? That is the most significant thing I think that we need to be looking at and arise out of this discussion. And I just want to say, this administration cannot shut down Petrotrim, They cannot shut it down if the people of this country stand up and they say no. If the people come together and they are strong enough in their efforts, this government cannot close down Petrotrim. So it all depends on everyone here and the people, the informed citizenry of this country. And the other thing is you have a memorandum of understanding, which seems to have been breached. I haven't had a close look at it, but we need to be looking at legal action, of course. That's our recourse. That's all.
Thanks. And for those who don't know, Judy Kublaz Singh is an attorney at law. Okay, so Denise, then Carolyn, and then Tony, and then I'll just summarize very quickly.
All right. Thank you very much. And this has been a really, really inspiring morning for me because I feed on the vision of our people, and I'm very, very confident that this nation has a right kind of approach. And we know what the problems are. We know that governance is a problem. The governance structure is broken and has to be redesigned. Some ideas came out here. I mean, I didn't hear the idea before about privatizing all of our state enterprises and allowing people to buy shares in it individually and therefore have a level of accountability that is very, very direct. I mean, that's a big idea, but that is something that can work entirely. My parting comments are that there needs to be some kind of socio-cultural analysis of if we shut down the refinery, what is the impact? And I know that the room is saying that the scenario of shutting down the refinery is not the preferred one, but I'm saying if that has to happen, we need to know the socio-cultural impact. And there's a theme that I have been working with for about 2 years now, and that is we must act. But act means accountability, collaboration, and transparency. Because without those three big concepts, nothing will happen. But I do have faith that the people of Trinidad and Tobago will do what is in our collective best interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Based on what you're saying about the socioeconomic impact, that's why I raised the point that in 1993, the closure of the refinery was rejected. And look at 1993 to today, compare it. We are ready to take off with refining margins. Your turnarounds, your upgrades are about to yield benefits. You're looking at the problem with crude oil pricing, what could possibly happen. And the point I was also trying to get at in this analysis is very possible that this whole new E&P could collapse as well without a refinery. That was the point I was trying to make. There's some other technical issues you raised about somebody raised about the bitumen and so on. From my experience with NPMC, that's an impossibility, by the way. You try to bring bitumen into this country, I don't think people know what they're talking about. You have to bring that in heated tankers. And as NP, when we exported up the islands, we used to lose endless product because of that. You have to dump the tanker with the bitumen in it. Because if that fails on you, it solidifies. So I don't know how they're going to bring this bitumen into Trinidad and Tobago. And that is just one example. You've raised others that we have not thought through things properly, and that what they're saying, I can bet you they have not done the technical analysis. So the other point I wanted to make is the citizen engagement part that people spoke about, Judy. We are the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The NGOs had a forum on Thursday where they have made a declaration supporting, or going against the closure of Petrotrim unless there's open and transparent discussion on the issue. They have a nice slogan, which I think we must adopt. They started by saying, I am Petrotrin. I want to say we adopt the slogan, we are Petrotrin. This is not about demonizing workers and unions. This belongs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago and will affect each and every one of us. When David talked about national consultations, and I listened to the Prime Minister saying, it's because of the union, etc. Some of you alluded to that. It is not an easy task. I would agree, sitting down with the union sometimes is not an easy task. David spoke about when we had ours. David would recall, by the time we met at the ministry, how long did it take us? 9 hours. When we sat there for our first meeting. But we did it. And you will not always agree on everything, but there will be consensus building. And this is one of the things as people of Trinidad and Tobago, we allow ourselves. When I came in as Minister of Energy, Tony, remember, we started national energy policy consultations all over this country, in every town hall and every school, because the people of Trinidad and Tobago, this is your resource. You need to make the input into the energy sector of this country. It is not to be decided by a few. And Tony would recall that. And you know the rich discussions we had? You know how many good ideas came out of that informed policy positions going forward. So it's not to say we can't do it. We could do it. So, you know, somebody mentioned the politics and coming together. Let me just say, the political philosophy for this country going forward is that we have to put country first. My problem is that we are so politically polarized that we don't know what is right and wrong anymore. It depends on what political party we belong to. We have to learn that we must agree with those when it is in the best interest in our country. And we have always adopted that as our mantra, and going forward, as political leader of the COP, that is our mantra. We will do anything that will serve the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and we'll join with anyone. And this is why we have expressed our solidarity with the union. They have demonized the union unnecessarily. And as a union, we must not allow that to happen. Let us get the right dialogue. You have the information. You all have the facts. I'm prepared to share anything. Get the message out as well, because we do want an informed discussion. Client state, we need to move away. New form of governance is required for this country. We have to move away from the client state, where everything is dependent, every job, every contract, because that is what is influencing decision-making in this country. We want to move forward as a country, we must move away from the client state. So with that, I say thank you for having me here this morning.
Thank you. I want to follow up on the question Nigel asked about what do we do? And I think Suramjit, you also said, what is the next steps? I mean, I don't like talk shops. I like places where people can find solutions. I know you can never come to a perfect solution with limited information, but you must start to move forward. So I want to suggest some actions you might want to take, and then we can work that out and get it better. Yeah, but you have to start somewhere. So think about this. What we are engaged in at the moment is a communications battle. Yeah, we are trying to influence outcomes by first influencing minds. The government strategy has been very clear to me. Now, I am a strategy consultant. In my work, I look at information, analyze it, come up with a narrative. And then, very importantly, no strategy is worth its salt unless it can be implemented. So I have to ask the question, who is the person or persons who pulls that trigger? Who makes that thing done? So if I do a really nice analysis and put it on a shelf, and that person never sees it, or never reads it, or never understands it, it's wasted. So then I have to ask the question, what is the motivator for that person to want to take the action that I want to see? And I have to craft my story to show how that motivation, that incentive, reaches that person. But more important than that, who is the person or entity that person trusts that can deliver that message? So I may be the academic, the analyst, but that person doesn't know me, doesn't trust me. So you have to get that thought process of our communication. And Denise knows this. Yeah? This is not about just putting a message out there. It's getting the message to the right person in the right way. Yeah? Now, how do we do that? What are the things, the incentives for decision makers? Now, here's how the strategies work. Again, from my view as an analyst, and I'm also a geologist, so I'm very comfortable picking up pieces of information with big gaps between them and making analysis and coming up with a story. I understand that that may not be the full story, but I'm happy starting that discussion, so I'm doing that here. So when I listened to the unfolding story of Petrotrim, the first thing that struck me, and do you remember, there was a leak to the Express the night before. That wasn't coincidental. Yeah, as David said, shock and awe. By the time morning came around, we expected the worst. Yeah? And then it wasn't about a future in refining, it was the end of refining. And then it wasn't only about, so the story evolved. And the story is probably evolving. Where is the end point? And how can we, as citizens, as owners, influence that end point? Do we know what that endpoint should be? Have we done the work ourselves? Or are we just going to continue whooping? Yeah? There's no data in the room. We talk about thousands affected. How many thousands? In what way? They're all mental health issues. How much? Where? We talk about Carolyn and TDC. What's been done? You know who's been living off the fat of this land, like I said before? And I mentioned UE. I also have to say this. Where is the data and the surveys to go ongoing on? We boast of 200 postgraduate degrees. How many people are those are collecting data? And where are the people who are going to get impacted by this? The Manufacturers Association won't be able to sell as much, the members won't be able to sell as much goods. The Chambers of Commerce, the Bankers Association, the Insurance Association, these people will be impacted. Are they funding any surveys? Are they spending any money? Are they engaging in this conversation? Do they belong to Trinidad and Tobago or just benefit from the fact? So let's call them out. You know, when Trevor Bobson was chairman of Petrotrim, I remember I went to him because we worked together in the ministry. And I trying to tell Trevor what to do. He said, Tony, you know, your problem is this, eh? You're always swimming upstream. You must learn from time to time to sit on the bank, get your strength, watch all the stream flowing, and then go back in the water and take him in the least part of resistance. And I've done that. But you know what I realized? Most people just sit on the side and wait. Nobody wants to swim upstream. You know, but it's difficult to do that if you haven't got ammunition to fight with. Yeah? So we have to do the work. Yeah? How do we do that work? What is the information out there? We had good pieces today, yeah? About the costs, the financial aspects, about the bitumen, about the cost of lifting. You heard all these questions asked, right? Where are the answers for that? Who's collecting the information? Who's analyzing it? Who's creating the narratives to feed into the population conversation? Yeah? And ask this, who is making the final decision? We think we know. What influences those decision-making? You think it's 100 technocrats sitting in a room? Or 5,000 voters in a constituency? What is the impact? How do those people get engaged? How do we come across as trustworthy? I sat on a forum at the Lord Best Institute with Union and in Petrotrim. And what I said then, I still hold true, is that neither entity was held in a high position in the country. There wasn't a lot of love for the country for either of those. Like it or not, that was the sense in the country. How is the union and the industry and those who have acted changing that impression? What are you doing to bring the country and the people on your side? If you want to win them over, they have to earn your trust. Yeah? So we have a lot of work to do, but we have to do it. Each of us. You know, it comes back to a culture change. The culture of sitting on the sidelines, watching the river flow by, is what got us where we are. Some of us have to swim upstream. Some of us have to put nation before self. You know, all of us have benefited from state patronage, from free education, healthcare, fuel subsidies, businesses. Most of the businesses benefit from the state, so nobody wants to talk out. And the culture is, if you talk out, you're opposed. You're not seen as being constructive. Yeah? And a part of that, sadly, is how we talk. David is a luminary in the way to talk to people who you disagree with. We speak softly and don't disrespect anybody. But our politics, unfortunately, is one of aggressive, confrontational behavior. That's what our leaders do. We are taught that leaders set culture. If our leaders use violent language, what do our children use? Why do guns or knives come out so quickly? We don't disagree well, you know? So we have to change our behaviors, all of us. You know, we have to set examples. Now, one of the most transformational activities in this country in my lifetime was an advertising campaign called Make Charlie Mad. Does anybody remember that? Yeah? Pat Bishop understood where the access for change was. It wasn't with the adults. It wasn't those who are setting the ways. It's in those who are formulating culture. And she went straight to the children. Nobody's doing that. Or anything about national ownership, about the cultural behaviors. We're trying to fix it up. That's not going to work. So we have to be thoughtful in how we solve this country's problems. The good news is that we have an access. This petrotrin issue has raised national awareness significantly. How do we ride that wave? How do we capture that? We have to be thoughtful and we have to go after it. There's a saying, and I might get it wrong, never let a good crisis go to waste. Yeah? Let's capture the moment, people. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tony and Carolyn and Denise for those comments. Gregory Fernandez, the chairman of MSJ, is going to give the closing remarks, or thank you rather, and so on. I just wanted to say one or two things without speaking too long. You know, the danger is that you give a trade unionist and a politician a microphone, and they speak for a long time. And of course, I'm both, right? Well, retired trade unionist. So let me just say that, and I think what we heard at the end there was critical from all three of our panelists, and that really is that this petrotrin issue is much more than just the workers, the company, the oil industry. It really goes to the heart of what kind of Trinidad and Tobago do we wish to have. And Denise said it, that there was a vision of independence. Dr. Williams of that generation provided, well, I was in Jamaica, so it was the Norman Manleys and so on that provided me as a young person with that sense of an idea going forward. But Dr. Williams, for all his flaws, and I could critique him for hours and hours and so on, did have a vision about independence to the first stage of being a republic. And what is happening now is really a repudiation of that vision of Trinidad and Tobago. It's a complete repudiation. Not just in terms of whether we have a state company or not have a state company. That's a symptomatic or an example of the debate. But it really is about what kind of society do we wish to have. Do we wish to have a society where it is really one where every man and woman has to fend for themselves and the devil takes the hindmost? Because that is really what is being implied in this decision when you get a Mr. Espinay saying that all he's concerned about, he doesn't care about emotions, therefore he doesn't care about people because there's only people who have emotions, right? All he cares about are the accounting numbers. So it is not even, and even those accounting numbers, as we have heard from Shariba and Carolyn, he's gotten wrong. But he's only concerned about the numbers. So there is no concern about people. And I'm an economist, but I am an economist who really is focused on political economy, so that the issues of the macroeconomic stuff and so on, I interpret in terms of the policy decisions that get made and what are the implications of those policy decisions for the country's development, which really means the development of our people in a sustainable way. And what this decision is saying is that we have to have a Trinidad and Tobago where the state is not going to have responsibility for the well-being and welfare of the citizens of the country. That essentially is what it is. And philosophically, we have to push that back. And that is where I think we appeal to the rest of the country to understand that after Petrotrin, it will be T&Tech and WASA and so on. But the implications of all of that are that prices, Sharon, will go up because prices, once we're importing fuel, the government cannot delay the payment of subsidy, which happens between NP and Petrotrin right now, because the government doesn't pay NP the subsidy right away. So Petrotrin doesn't get it from the government right away because the government's position is, well, that is part of the cash flow thing. So if it's the left hand or the right hand, it's all within the state sector, so we don't mind. So the reality is, the question, the question was asked. So as of March 2017, I don't have the 2018 figures, the government owed Petrotrim $1.8 billion in outstanding subsidies and so on, and the Petrotrim owed $3.1 billion in taxes. All right, so they will talk about what is owed in taxes, but they wouldn't say what the government owes through NP, that in subsidies. But no international trader will be waiting to get 1.8 billion TT dollars for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And therefore, the price that NP pays to the international trader will be, as Winston Mutu made it very clear, will not only be the actual price that you see traded on Bloomberg or whatever you track prices on, but it will be that price plus freight and insurance, plus the terminaling costs, plus the markup by the trader, etc. And therefore, the price at the pump will be considerably higher than even the market price. And the government will have to do that because it cannot delay the subsidy payments to an international trader. They're not waiting for that amount. And if you decide that you want to have TNTech make a profit, then the price of electricity will have to go up. And not only to the individual householder, but to the manufacturers. And when the closure of the refinery, because there were the two largest consumers of electricity in the country were first, ArcelorMittal, secondly, Pointe-à-Pierre. So TNTech now has lost its largest customer and is about to lose its second largest customer, which is going to put a huge impact on TNTech's revenue situation. Who is going to pay for that? The government will come around and say that the ordinary householders and the manufacturers now will have to pay more money, which will make our manufacturing less competitive, and that will have an impact. So you see, the implications are multiple right throughout the economy, and so on. And unless we take all of those things into consideration, therefore, and Tony is right, nobody has then done, what is the implication to our GDP? Because once the refinery closes, our GDP will go down, perhaps by 2%. I haven't done the actual maths, 2-3%, 3%, and so on. When that happens, our debt to GDP ratio actually goes up, which worsens our credit rating, which is what they're trying to avoid, so they claim, and so on and so on. So there are all kinds of implications to the decisions. But again, it comes back to the issue of action without vision is a nightmare. So we have to challenge the philosophical basis upon which all of this is happening. The tax, I did a back of the envelope calculation and so on, maybe $300+ million loss in revenue to the BIR from Petrotrim's employees, the employees in the contractor and other sectors and so on. So there's a tax loss at the time when the Minister of Finance has continuing to have a budget deficit. NIS may be about anywhere between $17 and $20 million a year in lost NIS. I think it's about $400 and something a month. Multiply that by 3,500 people, and you get the NIS loss in a situation where the NIS itself is in difficulty, and the actuaries say that the contribution rates have to be further increased, etc., which individual NIS contributors and the employers are finding it difficult to meet, and so on. So all of these are add-on implications, and so on. And then the government is saying, we are going to allocate a significant part of the PSIP, which is now government's actual expenditure, which is direct taxpayers' money, to projects in defense line community areas to compensate for the loss of Petrotrim, which means now that taxpayers' money is going to do the work or be invested in things like box drains and so on for ex-Petrotrim workers or other people in the defense line communities to get a part-time work, as the case may be. That's not a productive use of taxpayers' money compared to an operation like Petrotrim. When the reality is, and you hear these statements, that taxpayers are financing Petrotrim. I want to say it again, not a cent of taxpayers' money is actually going from the consolidated fund into Petrotrim. Not a cent is actually going into Petrotrim. Now, one could argue that Petrotrim not paying its taxes is depriving the taxpayer of benefits, which is true. But, and if Tony didn't get into that, the multinational companies with the transfer pricing, and if you look at the IMF Article 4 consultation report, which I read yesterday evening, because I have to speak about it on the budget tomorrow, they're saying the transfer pricing issue with respect to the multinationals over our gas is costing us tens of billions, well, they didn't say tens of billions, I'm now saying tens of billions of dollars, right? Every year, or many billions every year. Added up is many tens of billion dollars over the years. So compared to 1 point something billion dollars net tax owed by Petrotrim, the loss of our tax revenue because of transfer pricing by the multinationals dwarfs that 100 times. But Petrotrim is demonized, but the multinationals are allowed to run, and so on. So all of these things we must make that point about. The Prime Minister says that he gets something to sign off on so that Petrotrim could get money to finance the purchase of crude. But it's not that the taxpayer is putting out the money to finance crude. They're giving a government guarantee for a short-term loan to cover the cost of crude, given Petrotrim's cash flow challenge and so on. So one of the things that we have to do is deconstruct the narrative that has been presented, that shock and awe narrative. And today we continued that process, and I want to thank Winston and Schreiber and Denise and Carolyn and Tony for help, and all of those of you who spoke this morning for helping to deconstruct the narrative. Second thing now, because as one famous person once said, it's not enough to know the world, you have to change it. And if you go back and Google where that came from, you'll know where I got that quote from. All right? And therefore, yes, and Alil is right. We have to, what are we going to do? And Schreiber responded to that as well. So there are a number of things. Write letters to the editor. Simple. Short letters to the editor. I know Wayne Koblansing has done, Stephen Tang was interviewed, other people. Write letters to the editor. Make social media light up, and so on. So I put up a post yesterday saying, Espinay, August 28th, said Petrotrim closes October 1st. September 28th, he said Petrotrim closes November 30th. You can't trust them. Basically like that. And somebody then put a long post saying, well, you can't trust the union because this, that, and the other. Well, I'm not going to really respond to that. But we need to be putting out our narrative out there, whatever spheres that we have. Put it out there on social media, because the more people who are made aware, the better it is. And then statements from all the business chambers. I mean, I'm not trying to tell you what you have to do, but we do have presidents of 3 chambers here. So we hope the information you got here today and with ones that we email to you would be of assistance. But statements by business chambers are important. And particularly, you see the smaller business chambers, if I could describe it as smaller. The geographical, let me put the geographical chambers. Because the geographical chambers are the ones, particularly in South and Central, who are in direct contact with what is happening on the ground. Yes? Because the larger chambers also have an agenda which coincides with the agenda of Mr. Espinay and of the government, which is to shift, because part of this paradigm shift is to shift wealth and income to a smaller and smaller minority. Economics, it is known as neoliberalism. And it all over the world where neoliberalism has taken root, income and wealth inequality has worsened tremendously. Don't believe me? Read Nobel Prize winner in economics Joseph Stiglitz, who wrote a very important book called The Price of Inequality. And many others have been writing and commenting on this. Even people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and others, who are the richest men in the world, have said that inequality is going to cause Western liberal capitalism to run into such a huge crisis that it could collapse. So they don't want it to collapse. So they say we have to reduce inequality. They say we have to raise taxes on the wealthy and on corporations, etc., redistribute, and so on. So there's what this is a redistribution of wealth, because somebody will get that refinery. somebody will get the producing fees because SVD said they require $6 billion to invest in the new EMP. So it's either they borrow it or they get foreign capital to come in and so on. The union's proposal is a joint venture arrangement with production sharing where no loss of asset ownership will take place, and the joint venture partner will be paid in oil, which increased oil will come to the refinery to add value for Trinidad and Tobago, which is a different model, and so on. So it is a huge issue about shifting wealth and income, and therefore the geographical chambers making statements, getting your members aware is very important, I think, to help to get the government to change its position. And then ultimately, because Tony is right, there are a few of us who went out. The very same night of the announcement, I was on CNC3, very first night, right? Because I knew, not just because I came from the union for so many years, but because I knew this decision was a bad decision. From all my understanding, I was on the Lashley committee, I'd gone through all the data, knew it was a bad decision, and so on. So that same night I was on, and have been on consistently. Carolyn, to her credit, and I want to her credit, came out very, very early in raising questions and opposing it, and that's very important. And so we have to put our physical bodies on the line. The late Henry Hudson Phillips, Carl Hudson Phillips' father, Grenadian born, very Afro-Caribbean and so on in his looks, very black, but spoke with an English accent out of Oxford, though I don't think he ever went to Oxford because he was a solicitor, was once reported to have said, probably jokingly, when he was in the war, instead of saying, who goes there, which is, what a sentry will do, who goes there? He said, advance and let your physiognomy be scrutinized. So we have to advance and let our physiognomies be scrutinized. In other words, we have to be physically present. And so the march is 3 days. Not everyone could perhaps march for 3 days, but march for 1 day. And on the last day, let us have a huge, huge, huge rally in Port of Spain. That's very, very important. And it can't just be Stephen Tang, ODBTU Blue. Because if it is only ODBTU Blue, the government is not going to change its position. Because they figure, and that is why they've gone with this particular model, to try to get rid of the union. So it has to be now thousands of other people who are concerned citizens, like many of us here in this room and so on, who are coming out. Credit union members, whether you belong to the credit unions like Antilles, Palo Seco, TechU, Trintoc, and so on, Penal, and so on, or whether it is the entire league now comes out, Joe, in the way that you came out outside the parliament on the issue of the legislation, because you're right. It's now wanted to shift power from credit unions to other institutions, and so on. So we need to have the people, which is where Tony started, the owners of the asset, coming out in a very powerful way. So those are some of the things that we can do, and to find, whether it's running an ad on Facebook, paid for an ad in the newspapers so people see it, and so on, budget commentaries, every avenue that is possible to say no to this con job, we have to do that as individual citizens. That now is our responsibility. And my responsibility has ended. I've gone over time. And let me just ask Gregory Fernandez, the chair of the MSJ, to close by thanking everyone.
I'll be very brief. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to, first of all, I want everybody to appreciate the contribution that Cara Sweets has actually made to this event, right? We have gotten use of this place without charge, and this would have normally been at a... I paid for the bread first, but the room and the cameras and so on, right? They contributed that to the event, so we want to thank them very much. To the speakers who contributed significantly to the debate here this afternoon, I want to thank, first of all, Tony Paul. His key accountability being core and poor governance being the backdrop of where we are today, how we get to where we want to go to, Petrotrim, and also indicating that Petrotrim has made significant contributions to many areas of our economy. So I want to thank Tony again for that great comments, those great comments he made. And then I want to move on to Ms. Sipasad Bechan, the leader of the Congress of the People. And of course, she did a very detailed analysis for us with a lot of figures, a lot of slides, clearly pointing out the con job being perpetuated on the population by the government. And I want to thank her very much for that contribution. She also pointed out that the plant, unlike what the government is saying, is relatively modern because of all the many upgrades. And that when we look at the figures, earnings before interest and taxes, that the EBITDA, as they call it, the plant is actually generating positive EBITDA, which is a very important thing in business. All right? So I want to thank her for making that very transparent for all of us and for those who have been following online. So that was a very great contribution, and we look forward to her support in fighting this closure of Petrotrim. Thank you very much, Ms. Deming, Ms. Deming made it clear that the youth, if they close Petrotrim, have little to look forward to, given no cocoa, no citrus, no sugar, no oil. Right? So those were the bases of Trinidad. And we just have gas now. But gas is something that would also end. And if we don't really have anything to offer the youths, we are inviting a lot more chaos in the society. Because I could imagine youths in South and Central, where Petrotrim would have been a big icon for them to look forward to. You know, people would be looking at where their future might lie, and now they're seeing a complete wasteland, right, from Central right down to Point 14. So the stimulation of youth and youth interest in the society, I think she brought that out. And that we have not learned the lessons from the previous history of industry closure in Trinidad. Right? So I want to thank Ms. Deming for her contribution to that social debate. Mr. Mutu gave his experience on transfer pricing and clearly indicated at this time that the margins are healthy, right, following up on the work done by Ms. Sipasad Bechan. And with various adjustments to utilization, the refinery can operate profitably, right? And the business of CARICOM is very profitable to the refinery, and it's something that we can lose in the short term because of all these statements being made by the government. And one of the things, of course, is that the government's position on the refinery and the closure of Petrotrim and the impact of Trinidad and CARICOM will have a serious impact on the ability of CARICOM to act as a bloc in world politics. Many times, CARICOM have taken decisions. We may be small, but we can punch above our weight. And Trinidad has been a leader in those decisions, right? Sometimes, you know, the powers, up to recently, the Prime Minister himself made a statement that how they were talking about using Trinidad as a base for invading Venezuela, right? He made that statement. And CARICOM as a whole threw off those things because they could vote as a bloc. Now, part of that is because of the intra-relationship between Trinidad and the CARICOM countries. Trinidad provides support and all of that. If that position of Trinidad goes away and people are now just trading directly with companies outside of the region and that whole Caribbean. You're going to see a whole completely different level of politics happening in the Caribbean and the impact on things happening on the world stage, right? So we have to look not just simply at, Trinidad's economic influence, but also the influence on the politics of the Caribbean that this decision will also impact on. It's a lot bigger than people understand. So I just wanted to add that to the point. And then Shriba, I didn't get her full name. Shiva Ali Rajak, right? She did a very, very good job. And, basically brought home the point that this whole upstream thing that the government has been talking about is highly risky. And there have been a lot of inaccuracies in the government statements to the public. I think a lot of that has been exposed today. And we have to make sure that this gets out to the public to win the hearts and minds, particularly of the people in the north. I live in the north, and it's a battle, right? They're not seeing it the same way as people in south. And a lot of it has to do with the information that is being fed, right? So getting this information out properly will help win hearts and minds, which is very important in pushing back against this, all right? So there were other speakers who made contributions, and I want to thank all of them from the different chambers and so on. I want to thank all the members of the trade unions who came out, of the credit unions, right, of MSJ members and others, the press that was here even though they left early, right, and other social representatives and activists and so on. I want to thank all of them for coming out today. They have contributed tremendously to this debate. You all have spent over 4 hours here. And I think that is a reflection of how serious this issue is and how everybody thinks about it. Right? And so, and of course, I want to thank the members of the MSJ team who helped organize and put things together. And with that, I come to the end of my remarks, and I thank you very much for coming, and safe return home.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to the PA system technician and also to the team that was doing the live stream. I think we had Javon give me an update a while ago in terms of the live stream. 26,000 were reached, 9,000 viewers over the period. So thanks to the live stream people. Thanks.
Bye.